Ellanor Wilson, a retired financial advisor, invested heavily in her son Ryan's tech startup, Summit Solutions. Initially supportive, she provided loans and monthly transfers to keep the company afloat. However, tensions escalated when Ryan, influenced by his fiancée Sophia, began misusing funds for lavish expenses, including a Bali trip. When Ellanor questioned the financials, Ryan called her a burden, sparking a devastating rift. As she uncovers deeper deception, Ellanor halts funding, setting the stage for a dramatic confrontation. Will Ryan's betrayal destroy their family, or can Ellanor reclaim her life? The truth lies ahead. If this gripping story of family betrayal and resilience moved you, please subscribe to our channel. Your support fuels more compelling tales. Hit the bell icon for notifications, share with friends, and join our community. Tomorrow's special story awaits. Don't miss it. Thank you for being here. The words lingered in the dimly lit ambiance of the upscale Seattle restaurant, each one a jagged shard piercing my heart. You've become nothing but a burden, Mom. Always hovering, always asking questions. I'm not your little boy anymore. I'm running $1 million company. Ryan's voice, sharp and unyielding, carried a venom I'd never heard before. Across the polished mahogany table, his face, once round with the softness of childhood, glowing with innocence, was now chiseled with disdain. His blue eyes, which had once sparkled with trust as he looked up at me, now glinted with cold impatience. The champagne flute in my hand, raised to toast his company's latest milestone, trembled slightly. The golden liquid, meant to symbolize celebration, now tasted like ash on my tongue, its bubbles mocking the joy I'd hoped to share. I sat frozen, the clink of silverware and murmurs of other diners fading into a dull hum as the weight of his words settled deep into my chest. Little did Ryan know, those words would unravel everything he'd built. The quiet lifeline I'd provided, monthly transfers that had kept his fledgling tech company from crumbling, would cease that very night. The funds that had paid his employees' salaries when cash flow dried up, that had covered the sleek office lease when clients delayed payments, that had bridged every gap in his ambitious venture, would vanish without warning. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand the gravity of that moment, I need to take you back to where it all began. My name is Ellanor Wilson, and for 3 decades, I carved out a career as a financial advisor at Cascade Financial Group in Portland. I guided clients through the uncertainties of markets, helping them secure their dreams while meticulously building my own financial foundation. Numbers were my language, a steady compass in a world of chaos, especially after my husband, James, passed away unexpectedly. Our children, Ryan and Olivia, were still in college then, and the grief threatened to swallow me whole. Yet I held firm, ensuring they graduated without the burden of debt, even as I navigated the loneliness of a home once filled with laughter. When I retired 2 years ago, I envisioned a new chapter, traveling to Chicago to visit Olivia, now a pediatric surgeon with a life of her own, or perhaps indulging in the cooking classes I dreamed of for years. Instead, Ryan's ambition pulled me back into his orbit. It was in my cozy, craftsman-style home in Portland that Ryan first shared his vision. Summit Solutions is going to change the game, Mom, he said, his voice brimming with the fire I hadn't seen since his high school days, when he'd pore over environmental science textbooks late into the night. We've developed prototype sensors that monitor water quality in real time at a fraction of the cost of existing systems. His eyes, so like his father's, shone with determination as he leaned forward on the worn leather couch. I could feel his passion, the same drive that had fueled his childhood experiments in our backyard. He and his college roommate Daniel Cooper had a solid plan. Ryan handled the tech, Daniel the marketing. They had the expertise, the vision, but not the capital. Angel investors are intrigued, Ryan admitted, his tone shifting to hesitation as he reached the heart of his visit. But they want more traction before they commit big money. Mom, I hate to ask, but you've always been so smart with your investments. Could you help us bridge the gap for a few months until we close this funding round? His words hung between us, and I studied his face. The familiar jawline, the earnest gaze that had once pleaded for extra cookies or a later curfew. My heart swelled with pride, but my mind raced, calculating risks. I'd always been cautious, a steward of my family's future. Yet this was Ryan, my son, chasing a dream I'd nurtured since he was small. How much do you need? I asked, already mentally sifting through my portfolio, weighing which assets I could liquidate without jeopardizing my retirement. When he named the figure, my breath caught. It was far more than I'd expected, a sum that could dent even my carefully curated nest egg. Still, I'd been fortunate with investments, and my retirement package was robust. I'll speak with Jacob at Green Valley Investments, I said after a pause, my voice steady despite the flutter in my chest. We can make it work, but Ryan, this is a loan, not a gift. You'll need to sign a formal agreement. His face tightened, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. Mom, I'm not a kid. I understand business. Then you'll understand why I need to protect myself, I replied, meeting his gaze evenly. This isn't about trust. It's about responsibility. Reluctantly, he nodded, and within a week, I transferred the funds to Summit Solutions account. Ryan and Daniel were overjoyed, promising repayment within 6 months once their investors came through. I felt a quiet satisfaction, believing I was investing not just in a company, but in my son's future. That was 18 months ago. The promised funding round collapsed, something about shaky market conditions and investors demanding more proof of concept. Product development hit snags, regulatory hurdles emerged, and soon Ryan admitted they needed more cash to stay afloat. I turned to Jacob Pierce, my trusted advisor and friend, for counsel. Over coffee in Portland's Pearl District, his face was etched with concern. Ellanor, you've already poured so much into Ryan's company, he said, his voice low. Any more would tap into your long-term care account. If Summit Solutions goes under, you'd be exposed. My heart sank, but I waved off his caution. I know the risks, Jacob, but I also know Ryan. He just needs a bit more time. Jacob adjusted his glasses, his expression softening, but firm. Then let's do it differently. Set up monthly transfers instead of a lump sum. You'll keep some control. I agreed, and soon I was wiring funds to Summit each month, enough to cover payroll and rent while they chased elusive revenue. Ryan called regularly, his voice warm with gratitude, assuring me they were so close to a breakthrough. I began visiting Seattle more often, eager to see the business I'd helped sustain. At the Rainier Innovation Hub, where they'd leased a modern office, I dropped by with homemade cookies, watching Ryan's small team of developers huddle over laptops. I attended product demos, asked about their strategy, and shared financial insights from my career. At first, Ryan welcomed my presence, proudly introducing me as the angel investor who made this possible. I felt valued, tethered to his dream. Then came Sophia Chen. Ryan brought her to dinner at the Evergreen Grill, his excitement palpable. Sophia's incredible, Mom, he said, his face lighting up as he described her. Tall, poised, with a mind as sharp as a blade, Sophia had a stellar resume, years at successful tech startups, a knack for turning visions into brands. She's completely revamped our marketing, Ryan gushed, oblivious to the subtle shift in my heart. I smiled, nodding politely, but a quiet unease settled in. Sophia's presence marked a turning point, one I couldn't yet name, but felt deep in my bones. As Sophia laid out the go-to market strategy with her usual polish, I couldn't help but admire her. Her voice carried the kind of confidence that filled a room, her words about market segmentation and value propositions flowing effortlessly, as if she'd rehearsed them 100 times. She stood at the head of the conference table, her tailored blazer accentuating her sharp presence, her eyes scanning the room with purpose. Yet beneath my admiration, a quiet unease stirred. Every so often, her gaze would flicker toward Ryan, my son, with a look that felt less like affection and more like possession, calculating, as if she were sizing up an asset. It was subtle, but it sent a shiver through me, a mother's instinct whispering that something wasn't quite right. When the meeting wrapped, Sophia turned to me, her lips curving into a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mrs. Wilson, it's such a pleasure to finally meet you, she said, her tone warm but measured, like someone playing a part. Ryan speaks of you all the time. He's so grateful for everything you've done. Such a devoted mother, making all those sacrifices. The word devoted lingered in the air, tinged with something that made it sound almost like a criticism, as if my love for my son bordered on smothering. I brushed it off, telling myself I was reading too much into it. Ryan was happy, wasn't he? His startup, Summit Solutions, was gaining traction, and that was what mattered most. I smiled back, murmuring something polite, but the unease lingered, a faint shadow I couldn't shake. Over the next few months, I began to notice changes in Ryan, small at first, but impossible to ignore. Our weekly phone calls, once filled with his excited updates about the business, grew shorter, his voice distracted, his answers vague. "Things are going great, Mom," he'd say, but when I pressed for details, he'd pivot, promising to fill me in later. When I visited the office in Seattle, he was often preoccupied, leaving me to wait in the sleek reception area while he wrapped up important meetings. Sophia was always there, her presence as polished as the glass walls surrounding us. She'd offer me coffee with that same smile, professional but never warm, as if she were performing a duty rather than extending genuine hospitality. I'd sit there, cup in hand, watching her glide through the office, wondering what lay beneath her flawless exterior. Then came the dinner that turned everything upside down. Ryan called me on a Tuesday afternoon, his voice bubbling with excitement. "Mom, I have amazing news. Can you come to Seattle tomorrow? I want to celebrate with you." My heart lifted at the sound of his enthusiasm, a rare echo of the boy who used to bound into the kitchen with stories of his day. I rearranged my schedule, made the 3-hour drive from Portland, and let my mind wander with possibilities. I assumed it was about Summit Solutions. Maybe they'd finally secured the investment they so desperately needed, or perhaps they'd landed a major client. The thought filled me with pride, a quiet reassurance that my sacrifices, the monthly transfers draining my retirement savings, had been worth it. When I arrived at the upscale waterfront restaurant, the kind with floor-to-ceiling windows and soft jazz drifting through the air, I found Ryan and Sophia waiting at a corner table. Their faces glowed with a shared secret, and before I could even settle into my chair, Ryan blurted out, "We're engaged!" Sophia extended her hand, the diamond on her ring catching the candlelight, its size almost ostentatious. It must have cost more than Ryan could afford, far more, given that I knew he wasn't drawing a salary, and my transfers were barely keeping the business afloat. My stomach tightened, but I forced a smile, offering congratulations and ordering champagne to toast their future. Inside, questions swirled like a storm. Where had the money for that ring come from? Why hadn't Ryan told me his relationship with Sophia was this serious? And with Summit Solutions still teetering on the edge, was this really the time for such an extravagant gesture? As dinner unfolded, I listened to their plans, each one more lavish than the last. A destination wedding in Bali, with guests flown in from across the globe, a honeymoon in the Maldives, lounging in overwater bungalows, a penthouse apartment in downtown Seattle, complete with skyline views. My fork paused midair as I processed their words, the sea bass on my plate suddenly tasteless. Finally, I couldn't hold back. "What about Summit Solutions?" I asked, my voice steady but firm. "Have you secured new funding?" Ryan's smile faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. Before he could answer, Sophia leaned in, her tone as smooth as ever. "We're in talks with several venture capital firms. One in particular is very interested. They're just doing their due diligence before committing." Relief washed over me, though it was tempered by skepticism. "That's wonderful," I said. "When do you expect to close the deal?" Sophia's smile didn't waver, but her response felt rehearsed, like a line from a script. "These things take time, Mrs. Wilson, but we're confident it will happen soon. Ryan's brilliant technology is finally getting the attention it deserves." Something about her words rang hollow, too polished, as if she were deflecting rather than informing. I glanced at Ryan, who was staring into his wine glass with an intensity that didn't match the moment. "Actually, Mom," he said at last, meeting my eyes with a look I couldn't decipher. Part hope, part desperation. "We were hoping you might help with the wedding costs. Just until this funding comes through. You know we'd pay you back." The words hit me like a cold wave. I set down my fork, my appetite gone. "Ryan," I said carefully, "I've already invested a significant amount in Summit Solutions. The monthly transfers are stretching my retirement funds thin." Sophia's smile tightened, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "But this is your only son's wedding," she said, her voice laced with something that felt like judgment. "Surely that's worth a small sacrifice." The word small ignited a spark of irritation in me. Small? I'd poured over a quarter of my retirement savings into their business, funds I'd spent decades building for my own future. I took a breath, keeping my tone even. I don't consider what I've already done a small sacrifice, Sophia. I've supported this business because I believe in Ryan, but I need to be cautious. Ryan reached across the table, his hand covering mine, his eyes pleading. Mom, please. This is really important to us. I wouldn't ask if I didn't think the company was about to turn a corner. My heart ached as I looked at him, remembering the little boy who'd once found a $10 bill on the sidewalk and insisted on returning it to our neighbor because it wasn't mine to keep. Was that honesty still in him, or had the pressures of this business, this relationship, changed him? I need some time to think about it, I said finally, and I'd like to see the latest financials for Summit Solutions before making any decisions. The air at the table shifted, growing heavy with tension. Ryan withdrew his hand, his face clouding over. Sophia's expression hardened, her lips pressing into a thin line that bordered on contempt. The financials? Ryan echoed, his voice tinged with disbelief as if I'd asked to invade his privacy. Mom, I just told you we're about to get major funding. Why do you need to see the books? I met his gaze, refusing to back down. Because I've been funding this business for 18 months, Ryan. If you're asking for more money, especially for something unrelated to operations, I have a right to understand where things stand. Ryan and Sophia exchanged a glance, a silent communication I couldn't decode. Fine, Ryan said at last, his tone clipped. I'll have Daniel send them over. But this is exactly what I mean. You treat me like I'm still a child who needs supervision. The accusation stung, but I kept my voice gentle. I'm treating you like a business owner who's asking for additional investment, Ryan. This isn't personal. It's financial prudence. Sophia stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Excuse me, I need to use the restroom, she said, her voice tight as she walked away, her heels clicking with purpose. Ryan leaned across the table, his voice dropping to an urgent whisper. Mom, please don't embarrass me like this. Sophia comes from a family with money. I don't want her thinking I can't provide for her. The revelation caught me off guard. Is that what this is about? I asked, my voice soft but pointed. You're trying to impress her family? Ryan's face flushed, his words tumbling out in a mix of frustration and confusion. No, yes, I don't know, but she believes in me, in Summit Solutions. She's introduced us to potential investors through her connections. I can't lose her support now. A cold dread settled in my chest, spreading like frost. Ryan, I said slowly, are you marrying Sophia because you love her, or because you think she can save your business? His face darkened, his voice rising with hurt. That's a horrible thing to say. Of course I love her. I held his gaze, searching for the truth. Then my question about the financials shouldn't upset either of you. If Summit Solutions is on solid ground, there's nothing to hide. Ryan's expression hardened, and he leaned back in his chair, his voice low and bitter. You've never trusted my judgment. Dad would have supported me without all these questions. The mention of his father was a knife to the heart, a low blow that left me reeling. I stared at my son, the man he'd become, and wondered where the boy I'd raised had gone. The rest of the dinner passed in a blur, the champagne flat, the conversation strained. As I drove back to Portland that night, the road stretching dark and endless before me, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong, not just with the business, but with Ryan's heart and the woman who now held it. The mention of his father, gone for a decade, hit like a punch to the gut, stirring a raw ache in my chest. Before I could muster a response, Sophia glided back to the table, her movements as smooth as ever, settling into her chair with an effortless grace. Her eyes darted between Ryan and me, a flicker of concern, or perhaps calculation, crossing her face. Is everything all right? She asked, her voice soft but probing. Everything's fine, I replied, forcing a smile that felt brittle on my lips. I was just telling Ryan I'll need to review the company's financials before we commit to any decisions about the wedding. My words were measured, but inside my heart churned with unease, the sting of Ryan's earlier jab still lingering. Sophia's smile vanished, her expression tightening as if I'd just thrown a wrench into her perfectly laid plans. Mrs. Wilson, I don't think you understand, she said, her tone clipped. each word laced with barely concealed frustration. The wedding is in 3 months. We need to secure deposits now, or we'll lose the venue. 3 months? I echoed, my voice catching as shock rippled through me. The timeline felt like a slap, so abrupt it left me reeling. That's soon. We don't believe in dragging out engagements, Sophia replied briskly, her eyes sharp, unyielding. The venue in Bali is perfect, but they had a cancellation. If we don't act fast, it's gone. I glanced at Ryan, searching for some sign of hesitation, but his gaze was fixed on Sophia, his face glowing with something close to worship. My stomach twisted. I see, Bethany, I said slowly, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. As I said, I'll need to review the company's financials before committing any more funds. Sophia's eyes narrowed, a flash of irritation breaking through her polished facade. Ryan, she said, turning to him, her voice now edged with a challenge. Perhaps you should explain to your mother that this is our wedding, not some business deal. Her constant involvement in every part of your life is starting to feel intrusive. Ryan's face froze, caught it in a tug-of-war between loyalty to his fiancée and the weight of my presence. His jaw tightened, and for a moment I saw the boy I'd raised, uncertain, torn. But then something hardened in his eyes, a shift that sent a chill through me. He straightened, his shoulders squaring as if bracing for battle. She's right, Mom, he said, his voice carrying a sharpness I'd never heard before. Each word slicing deeper than the last. You're always questioning me, always hovering. I'm not your little boy anymore. I'm running $1 million company. My breath caught, a sharp pain lodging in my chest. A company that exists because of my investment, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of hurt and defiance. An investment you'll get back with interest once we secure proper funding, Ryan shot back, his tone cold, unyielding. But that's not going to happen if you keep meddling. The last investors were scared off because you were always there, always in the way. Sophia had to pull strings to even get these new ones interested. His words hit like a tidal wave, each one eroding the fragile trust I'd clung to. No one had ever told me my involvement was a problem. I'd poured everything, my savings, my faith, my heart, into his dream, and now it was being thrown back in my face. You never said anything, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to hurt you, Ryan said, his voice rising, a mix of frustration and something darker. But I'm done walking on eggshells. You're becoming a burden, Mom, always hovering, always questioning. The word burden landed like a stone, heavy and cold, sinking into the pit of my stomach. The restaurant's hum faded, the clink of glass and murmur of voices dissolving into a suffocating silence. I stared at my son, this stranger across the table, his face a mask of resentment I barely recognized. Something inside me fractured. A quiet snap I felt more than heard. A burden, I repeated, the word tasting bitter, foreign. Sophia's hand shot out, resting on Ryan's arm, her voice smooth as silk. Ryan doesn't mean that, she said, her tone conciliatory, but her eyes told a different story, sharp, calculating, as if she'd orchestrated this moment. He's just stressed about the wedding and the business. We're all under pressure. But Ryan didn't retract his words. Instead, he met my gaze, his eyes glinting with defiance and something colder. Something that mirrored the contempt I'd occasionally glimpsed in Sophia's stare. Maybe I do mean it, he said quietly, each word deliberate, cutting. Maybe it's time you let me stand on my own instead of trying to control everything. My hands, steadier than I expected, set my napkin down with care, as if the simple act could anchor the storm raging inside me. I see, I said, reaching for my purse. If that's how you feel, I wouldn't want to be a burden. Mom, Ryan started, a flicker of regret crossing his face, as if he sensed he'd crossed a line. No, I cut him off, my voice firm, though my heart was splintering. You've made yourself clear. I stood, surprised by the calm that settled over me, a fragile shield against the pain. I think I should go. Mrs. Wilson, please, Sophia said, her tone suddenly warm, almost pleading. Let's not end the evening like this. We're about to be family. I looked at her, then at Ryan, searching for the son I thought I knew. I'm not sure what kind of family you're envisioning, Sophia, I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. But it doesn't sound like one I want to be part of. Ryan, when you're ready to show me those financials, you know how to reach me. As I walked out of the restaurant, Ryan's voice called my name once, faint and uncertain, but I didn't turn back. The valet brought my car, and I drove through Seattle's rain-soaked streets, the city lights blurring through the tears I refused to let fall. Instead of making the long drive back to Portland, I checked into a hotel, my emotions too raw to trust myself on the road. In the sterile quiet of the hotel room, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the blank wall, the word burden echoing in my mind. After all I'd sacrificed, years of late nights, scraped together savings, unwavering belief in Ryan's dreams, this was how he saw me. My phone buzzed relentlessly, Ryan's name flashing across the screen. Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't mean it. Please call me back. We need to talk. I ignored the messages, shutting off the phone with trembling hands. Instead, I opened my laptop, the glow of the screen casting harsh shadows across the room. My fingers shook as I logged into my banking portal, navigating to the recurring transfers. There it was, Summit Solutions, scheduled to receive another infusion of my money in 3 days. Doubt crept in, insidious and heavy. Was I being impulsive? Would canceling the transfer destroy Ryan's business? His dream? Would he ever forgive me? But then I saw his face again, those cold, dismissive eyes, Sophia's smug smile beside him. Whatever was happening at Summit Solutions, it wasn't the transparent partnership Ryan had promised. My finger hovered over the cancel button, my heart pounding. Then, with a clarity that cut through the pain, I clicked cancel and confirmed. For the first time in 18 months, I wouldn't be bailing out my son's company. If he wanted to stand on his own, so be it. Sleep came in fragments that night, my dreams haunted by Ryan's voice, by the contempt in his eyes. By morning, exhaustion had solidified into resolve. Before leaving Seattle, I made one final stop at Summit Solutions' office in the Rainier Innovation Hub. In the pale morning light, the sleek glass building looked stark, its promise of ambition now tinged with betrayal. I sat in my car for nearly 20 minutes, watching young professionals bustle through the doors, their lives untouched by the fracture in mine. Steeling myself, I headed to the 6th floor, where Summit Solutions occupied a corner suite. The reception area was empty, the part-time receptionist not due for another hour. But light spilled from the back offices, and I used the emergency key card Ryan had given me, my heart thudding as I stepped inside. In the conference room, I found Daniel Cooper, surrounded by spreadsheets, his usually tidy appearance frayed, tie loosened, hair disheveled. His eyes widened at the sight of me. "Mrs. Wilson," he stammered, "we weren't expecting you." "Clearly," I said, setting my purse down with a calm I didn't feel. "Daniel, I need to see the company financials. All of them, not just Ryan's quarterly summaries." He hesitated, his hand raking through his thinning hair. "I'm not sure Ryan would—" "Ryan called me a burden last night," I interrupted, my voice steady but laced with pain. To my face, so I'm done waiting for his permission. The sting of my own words lingered in the air, sharp and unyielding, as I stood in Daniel's cramped office. "He can take up any objections with me directly," I said, my voice carrying an edge I hadn't meant to sharpen so fiercely. My heart thudded with a mix of indignation and dread. After pouring over $250,000 into this company, I think I've earned the right to know exactly where every penny has gone. The weight of that sum, my life savings, carefully entrusted to my son Ryan's vision, pressed against my chest like a stone. Daniel's face drained of color, his eyes widening with a flicker of shock. "He said that to you?" he asked, his voice soft, almost disbelieving. "That doesn't sound like Ryan." His words were a quiet plea, as if he could will the Ryan he once knew back into existence. I caught the faint tremble in his tone, the loyalty of a friend grappling with a truth he didn't want to face. "People change," I replied, the bitterness slipping out before I could rein it in. My throat tightened as I spoke. Memories of Ryan, my bright, ambitious son, clashing with the stranger he'd become. Sometimes they become unrecognizable. The words felt like a confession, heavy with the grief of a mother who could no longer reconcile the boy she'd raised with the man sitting across town, dodging her calls. Daniel studied me for a long moment, his gaze steady but laced with something like pity. Then he sighed, a deep, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of months of unspoken truths. "You should sit down, Mrs. Wilson," he said gently, his voice barely above a whisper. My stomach churned as I lowered myself into the chair, the worn leather creaking under my weight. I braced myself, sensing the unraveling of something I wasn't sure I was ready to face. He turned to his laptop, his fingers flying over the keys with a kind of resigned urgency. Then, with a hesitant glance my way, he swiveled the screen toward me. "These are our actual financials for the past 2 quarters," he said, his voice low and deliberate. "Not the polished versions Ryan approved to send you." For the next hour, Daniel guided me through the grim reality of Summit Solutions, peeling back the layers of a company I'd believed in as fiercely as I'd believed in my son. The prototype they developed was promising, a beacon of innovation that had once filled me with pride. But the numbers told a different story. Manufacturing costs had spiraled far beyond projections, eating away at the budget like a ravenous beast. Early clients, initially enthusiastic, had walked away after tests revealed persistent reliability issues. Each revelation felt like a pinprick to my heart, but it was the final blow that left me reeling. Large, unexplained sums labeled as consultant fees, with no documentation to justify them. I pointed to a particularly egregious payment from the previous month, my finger trembling slightly. "Who's receiving these consulting fees?" I asked, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Daniel rubbed his face, his exhaustion palpable. He looked like a man who'd been carrying a secret too heavy for one person to bear. "Officially, they're going to SC Innovations for marketing services," he said, his voice barely audible. "SC," I said, the pieces snapping into place with a sickening clarity. Sophia Chen. The name tasted bitter on my tongue. Ryan's fiancée, the woman he'd insisted was the key to Summit's success. Daniel nodded, his expression one of quiet misery. "Ryan swore she had connections that would turn things around," he said. "But so far, all she's done is draft a few presentations and set up meetings that lead nowhere." His words were careful, but I could hear the frustration simmering beneath them, the disillusionment of a man watching his friend's dream crumble. "How much has she been paid in total?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. Daniel pulled up another spreadsheet, and when the figure appeared on the screen, I felt the air leave my lungs. Nearly half of my investment, hundreds of thousands of dollars, had funneled directly into Sophia's consulting company. The room seemed to tilt, and I gripped the edge of the desk to steady myself. "Does she actually provide any services?" I asked, my voice hollow, though I already knew the answer. Daniel hesitated, choosing his words with care. "She makes phone calls, sends emails," he said, "but mostly she just influences." He glanced away, as if ashamed to admit it. "Ryan's convinced she's worth it." I stared at the screen, the columns of numbers painting a portrait of betrayal so vivid it stole my breath. This wasn't just about money. It was my son, my only child, taking advantage of my trust, my love, my belief in him. The Ryan I'd known, the one who'd spent late nights sketching out his vision for Summit Solutions, who'd hugged me tightly at the company's launch party, was gone. In his place was a man who spent company funds on lavish dinners, first-class flights, and networking events that conveniently aligned with gallery openings and exclusive parties. Each expense felt like a personal wound, a betrayal not just of my investment, but of the bond we'd shared. "And the investor meeting?" I asked, clinging to the hope that Ryan's promises of new funding weren't entirely hollow. He'd been so confident, so convincing, when he told me they were on the verge of securing major backers. Daniel shook his head, his expression grim. "There's been interest, but no serious commitments for months. The last group pulled out after they saw our burn rate and started asking questions about those consulting fees." His voice was heavy with regret, as if he blamed himself for not acting sooner. "Does anyone else know about this?" I asked, my mind racing. The developers, the ones toiling away on the prototype, surely they'd noticed something was wrong. "They suspect," Daniel admitted. "They haven't gotten their bonuses, and Ryan keeps stalling on equipment purchases they need to keep working. Meanwhile, he and Sophia are planning some extravagant wedding in Bali." His voice cracked, and for a moment, I saw the depth of his own pain. a friend watching someone he cared about spiral out of control. I closed my eyes, letting the weight of it all settle over me. The monthly transfers I'd been making, the ones I'd thought were keeping Summit afloat, were the only thing standing between the company and collapse. Without them, Daniel said quietly, we would have folded 3 months ago. I reached for my phone, my fingers moving almost on instinct as I opened my banking app. The cancellation of the recurring transfer stared back at me, processed and final. In 10 days, when the next payment was due, Summit Solutions would receive nothing. The decision had been made in a moment of anger, but now it felt like the only lifeline I had left to pull Ryan back from the edge. Daniel's voice broke through my thoughts, hesitant but urgent. Mrs. Wilson, what are you going to do? I looked at him, this young man who'd been Ryan's friend since their college days, caught in the wreckage of my son's choices. His eyes were wide with worry, but there was a flicker of hope there too, as if he believed I could fix this. I'm going to protect what's left of my investment, I said, my voice firm despite the ache in my chest. And then I'm going to save my son from himself, whether he wants to be saved or not. The next 2 hours were a blur of spreadsheets and explanations as Daniel laid out the full scope of Summit's precarious position. The technology was still groundbreaking, the market still ripe with potential, but Ryan's leadership had veered them into dangerous territory. Mismanagement, misplaced priorities, and Sophia's influence had bled the company dry. As I gathered my things to leave, Daniel stopped me, his voice low. There's one more thing you should know. Ryan and Sophia are flying to Bali next week to scout wedding venues. The tickets were bought with company funds. The words hit like a physical blow, each one deepening the wound of betrayal. I nodded, unable to find words, and thanked him for his honesty. I know this wasn't easy, I said, my voice softer now. You could have stayed silent. He rubbed the back of his neck, his discomfort evident. I should have come to you sooner, he said. Ryan was my best friend. I kept hoping he'd snap out of it. I reached out, resting a hand on his arm. We both wanted to believe the best of him, I said, my voice catching. The weight of shared disappointment hung between us, a fragile bond forged in the ashes of trust. The drive back to Portland was a haze of rain and regret. I made 2 calls from the car, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. The first was to Amanda Ross, the lawyer who'd helped me navigate estate planning after my husband James passed away. The second was to Jacob Pierce, my financial advisor, whose calm pragmatism had always anchored me in moments of uncertainty. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I had appointments with both for the next day. My house, usually a haven, felt cavernous and cold as I moved through it, flipping on lights to push back the encroaching dusk. In the kitchen, I paused at the refrigerator, its door a patchwork of memories. Ryan's college graduation, his proud smile as he and Daniel cut the ribbon at Summit's first office, the 2 of us laughing at the company's launch party. Each photo was a snapshot of a life I thought we shared, built on love and mutual respect. Now I wondered if it had all been a mirage, if Ryan had ever seen me as more than a source of funds. My phone buzzed, pulling me from my thoughts. Another text from Ryan. Mom, please call me back. We need to talk about this. Sophia feels terrible about what happened. I stared at the words, my thumb hovering over the screen. Sophia, with her polished charm and empty promises, was at the heart of this mess. I set the phone down, unanswered. Whatever conversation we needed to have would happen on my terms, not his. Sleep eluded me that night, my mind churning with images of Ryan's betrayal and the company's unraveling. By morning, I was exhausted but resolute as I sat across from Amanda Ross in her sleek Portland office. I laid out everything. The initial $250,000 investment, the monthly transfers, the discovery of funds siphoned off to Sophia's company. Amanda listened intently, her pen scratching across her notepad as she absorbed every detail. To be clear, she said, her voice calm but probing, was there a formal loan agreement or investment contract? I nodded, pulling the documents from my bag. For the initial amount, yes, I said. We had a proper loan agreement with repayment terms, but the monthly transfers, those were more informal. Ryan sent emails, updates about the company's progress, promises of new investors. My voice faltered as I realized how easily I trusted those assurances, how desperately I'd wanted to believe in him. Amanda's eyes softened, but her tone remained professional. We'll need to review everything. Emails, bank records, the loan agreement. If the funds were misappropriated, we have options. But it won't be simple. Her words were a lifeline, a reminder that I wasn't powerless, even if I felt broken. As I left her office, the weight of the past 24 hours settled over me. I wasn't just fighting for my money. I was fighting for the truth, for the son I'd raised, and for the future of a company that still had a spark of potential. The road ahead would be grueling, but I was ready to face it, not just as an investor, but as a mother determined to pull her son back from the brink. As Ellanor sat across from Amanda in the softly lit office, her heart churned with a mix of dread and resignation. She had come seeking clarity, but the weight of the paperwork sprawled across the desk only deepened her unease. Amanda, her lawyer, flipped through the documents with a furrowed brow, her sharp eyes scanning each page as though unearthing secrets Ellanor wasn't sure she was ready to face. The air felt thick with unspoken accusations, and Ellenor's chest tightened as Amanda's expression grew more troubled with every passing moment. "Ellanor," Amanda finally said, her voice measured but heavy with concern, "some of the things you've described, using investment funds for personal expenses, misrepresenting the company's financial health to secure more money, those could be considered fraud. This isn't just sloppy bookkeeping. These are serious, potentially criminal issues." The word fraud landed like a blow, sharp and cold, cutting through the fragile hope Ellanor had clung to. Her son, Ryan, her only child, the dreamer she'd poured her savings into, could be tangled in something so deceitful. She shook her head quickly, her voice trembling but firm. "I don't want to press charges against Ryan. He's my son. I need to protect what's left of my investment. I need to stop the damage before it's too late." Her words were laced with a mother's desperation, a plea to salvage both her finances and the bond she feared was fraying beyond repair. Amanda tapped her pen rhythmically against her legal pad, her thoughtful gaze softening slightly as she considered Ellenor's position. "We have options," she said, her tone shifting to one of pragmatic resolve. "The initial loan agreement gives us leverage. We could issue a formal notice of default, which would solidify your standing as a creditor if Summit Solutions collapses. As for the monthly transfers you've been making, we could argue they were conditional on the funds being used for legitimate business purposes, which, based on what you've told me, clearly hasn't been the case." Ellanor nodded, her mind racing as she tried to process the legal jargon through the fog of her emotions. She thought of the countless checks she'd written, each one a gesture of faith in Ryan's vision, each one now feeling like a brick in a crumbling wall. "And the trip to Bali, the wedding expenses?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking the words too loudly might make the betrayal more real. Amanda leaned forward, her expression a mix of sympathy and professionalism. "Those are trickier. You haven't directly funded them yet, which complicates things. But as a major creditor, if company money is being misused for personal extravagances like that, you could pursue legal action to halt further misuse. It's not ideal, but it's a path to protect your interests." By the time their meeting ended, Amanda had crafted a plan that balanced asserting Ellenor's rights with avoiding immediate bankruptcy for Ryan's company. It wasn't the future Ellanor had imagined when she'd first invested in her son's dream, a dream she'd believed in with every fiber of her being. But now necessity trumped sentimentality, and she left the office with a heavy heart but a clearer path forward. Her next meeting with Jacob Pierce, her financial advisor, was no less sobering. His office overlooked the Willamette River, the water glinting under the gray afternoon sky, a serene contrast to the turmoil roiling inside here. Jacob leaned back in his chair, his expression a blend of concern and blunt honesty. "I won't say I told you so, Ellanor," he began, though the faint arch of his brow suggested he was tempted. "But I did warn you about putting so much into Ryan's venture." Ellanor sighed, her shoulders sagging under the weight of regret. "You did," she admitted, her voice soft with self-reproach. "I should have listened." She'd been so caught up in Ryan's enthusiasm, his grand promises of innovation and success, that she'd ignored the cautionary whispers in her mind. Jacob pulled up her financial portfolio on his computer, the numbers stark and unforgiving. "The good news," he said, is that stopping those monthly transfers will at least stop the bleeding. And the bad news? The money you've already invested, it's likely gone. Eleanor's heart sank, but she clung to a sliver of hope, explaining Amanda's legal strategy. If I can recover even a fraction of the initial investment, it would help, she said, her voice tinged with fragile determination. Jacob nodded, his expression thoughtful but guarded. That's better than nothing, he conceded. Now let's focus on what's next. Your retirement cushion is thinner than it was 2 years ago, significantly thinner. You're not destitute, Eleanor, but you'll need to make adjustments. They spent the next hour reshaping her financial plan, cutting back on luxuries she'd once taken for granted. The dream of leisurely world travel would have to wait, perhaps indefinitely. She wouldn't lose her home or be forced back to work, but the life she'd envisioned for her retirement was slipping away, piece by piece. As she left Jacob's office, her phone buzzed in her purse and Ryan's name flashed on the screen. Her stomach twisted. After 3 days of avoiding his texts, his call felt like a confrontation she wasn't ready for. Still, she answered, her voice steady but guarded, as she walked to her car. Mom, finally, Ryan said, relief flooding his tone. I've been trying to reach you for days. I needed time to think, Eleanor replied, her words clipped, her emotions tightly reined in. She could hear the strain in his voice as he rushed on. Look, I'm really sorry about what I said at dinner. I was stressed, and it came out wrong. You know I don't think of you as a burden. The memory of that dinner stung. His careless words, flung in a moment of frustration, had cut deeper than he could know. She said nothing, letting the silence stretch, heavy and deliberate. Mom, Ryan prompted, his voice tinged with unease. Are you still there? Eleanor reached her car and leaned against it, exhaustion settling into her bones. I visited Summit Solutions yesterday, she said finally, her tone flat but laced with accusation. I spoke with Daniel. There was a pause, then a defensive edge in Ryan's voice. Daniel shouldn't have shown you those files without my approval. The deflection hit her like a slap. No denial, no explanation, just concern that his carefully curated narrative had been exposed. So you don't deny misusing company funds? She pressed, her voice rising slightly, betraying the anger she'd tried to suppress. Paying Sophia exorbitant consulting fees for questionable services? Planning a luxury trip to Bali on company money while your employees go without bonuses? Ryan's response was quick, almost rehearsed. It's not that simple, Mom. Sophia's connections are valuable. The Bali trip has potential investor meetings tied to it. You're looking at numbers without understanding the strategy. His words were smooth, polished, but they rang hollow to Eleanor. She'd heard his pitches before, believed them too many times. Enlighten me then, she challenged, her voice sharp. Explain the strategy behind lying to me for months about the company's financial health. Explain how paying your fiancée hundreds of thousands in consulting fees is good business when your technology is unreliable and your client base is shrinking. Ryan started to protest, then stopped, his silence heavy with frustration. When he spoke again, his tone carried a familiar edge, one she'd heard at that disastrous dinner. Who's running this company, Mom? Me or you? Because last I checked, I'm the CEO. The arrogance in his voice sparked something in Eleanor, a mix of hurt and resolve. All need is y'all, and I'm your primary investor, she shot back. The only reason Summit Solutions still exists is because of my monthly transfers. Transfers that, by the way, are done. She could almost hear his shock through the phone, a sharp intake of breath. What do you mean, Ian? Demanded. I've canceled the recurring transfers, Ryan, she said, her voice steady now, though her heart ached. No more money, not for the business, and definitely not for a destination wedding in Bali. He sputtered, his composure cracking. You can't do that. We have payroll, vendor payments, all of which should have been covered by actual business revenue by now, according to the projections you showed me, Eleanor interrupted, her voice firm but trembling with the weight of her decision. I'm not obligated to keep funding a mismanaged company. Ryan's tone shifted, turning cajoling, almost pleading. This is because of what I said at dinner, isn't it? Mom, I told you I didn't mean it. You know how much I value your support. The words stung, not because they were insincere, but because they were only half true. Your financial support, certainly, she said, her voice heavy with sadness. But my advice, my concerns, you've dismissed those for months. She leaned harder against the car, the cold metal grounding her as her emotions threatened to spill over. I've spoken with a lawyer, Ryan. I'll be sending a formal notice about the default on your original loan. And the additional funds I've provided? We'll be documenting those too. A lawyer? Ryan's voice was incredulous, tinged with betrayal. You're seriously getting lawyers involved? We're family. The word family pierced her, and for a moment she closed her eyes, fighting the tears that threatened to fall. Yes, we are, she said softly, her voice breaking, which is why your betrayal cuts so deep. Betrayal? Wow, he scoffed, but there was a tremor in his voice. That's ridiculous. I've been building a company that'll make us both wealthy. Every decision I've made has been for that goal. Eleanor's heart ached as she heard the echo of the boy he used to be, the one who could talk his way out of anything with a charming smile and a clever excuse. But she wasn't that naive mother anymore. Including the decision to lie to me? She asked quietly. To misuse funds? To call your mother a burden when she questions your judgment? He didn't answer right away, and in the silence she could almost see him searching for the perfect words, the ones that had always worked to smooth things over. But this time she wasn't listening. The conversation with Ryan had reached a breaking point, and I felt an unshakable resolve settle deep within me. His voice, softer now, carried a plea that tugged at my heartstrings, but I refused to let it unravel my decision. Mom, he said, his tone laced with a mix of desperation and frustration, I know I've messed up before, but if you pull your support now, everything we've poured our hearts into will collapse. Is that what you want? The question hung heavy, designed to pierce my conscience, but I wasn't swayed. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. What I want, Ryan, I replied, each word deliberate, is for my son to own up to his choices. I want to see honesty, respect, and responsible stewardship of the resources I've entrusted to you. Until I see real evidence of that, I'm done writing checks. My voice was calm but firm, a line drawn in the sand after months of enabling his recklessness. Ryan's attempt to shift the blame was predictable. What about our employees, Mom? What about the people who believe in Summit Solutions? His words were a calculated jab, meant to stir guilt, but I saw through the manipulation. Maybe, I suggested coolly, you could start by cutting those exorbitant consulting fees to Sophia's company. Or how about canceling those first-class tickets to Bali? There are plenty of ways to trim expenses without touching your employees' livelihoods. Ryan's response was a low mutter, barely concealing his irritation. This is unbelievable. You're going to tear everything down over one comment I made in the heat of the moment. I shook my head, though he couldn't see it. No, Ryan, this isn't about one comment. It's about a pattern of destructive behavior that's hurting your business and our relationship. If Summit Solutions is as strong as you say, you'll find a way to make it work without my constant bailouts. His voice turned sharp, biting. Fine. If that's how you want to play it, don't come to me when you realize you've thrown away your investment out of spite. The words stung, but I refused to let them wound me. Goodbye, Ryan, I said softly, ending the call with a quiet click that felt like the closing of a chapter. I sat in my car for what felt like hours, the world outside blurring as cars streamed by on the highway. A strange calm washed over me, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions I'd braced for. For the first time in 18 months, I wasn't consumed by worry over Ryan's company or the next sum of money he'd begged for. The decision was made, the weight lifted. Whatever came next was his to carry. The following week unfolded in an eerie limbo. A formal notice from Amanda arrived, confirming the default paperwork had been filed, a cold procedural acknowledgement of the line I'd drawn. Ryan didn't reach out again, but Sophia tried twice, her voicemails dripping with calculated manipulation. One moment she was all syrupy sympathy. I understand how hurt you must feel. The next she wielded subtle pressure. Ryan's under so much stress. He needs his mother's support now more than ever. Each word was a carefully crafted hook, but I deleted both messages without a second thought, unwilling to be reeled back in. Then, on Friday afternoon, the doorbell jolted me from my thoughts. I opened the door to find Olivia standing on the porch, her suitcase clutched tightly, Her dark hair tousled from the Chicago wind. My heart skipped. "Olivia," I gasped. "What are you doing here? I thought you had surgery scheduled all week." She dropped her bag and enveloped me in a fierce hug, her warmth grounding me. "I swapped shifts," she said, her voice steady but laced with concern. "Ryan called me. He said you were having some kind of breakdown, that you'd cut him off and were threatening legal action. I was worried about you." I pulled back, searching her face, her eyes wide with genuine care. Of course, Ryan would try to pull Olivia into this, spinning a narrative to cast me as unhinged. It was another layer of manipulation, but I couldn't fault Olivia for rushing to what she believed was a family crisis. "I'm not having a breakdown," I assured her, guiding her inside with a hand on her shoulder. "But a lot has happened. Let's make some tea, and I'll tell you everything." Over the next hour, as steam curled from our mugs, I unraveled the story. I spoke of the initial investment I'd made in Summit Solutions, the monthly transfers that had drained my savings, the slow realization of Ryan's financial mismanagement, and the final straw, his cruel words at the restaurant, dismissing me as a burden. Olivia listened in silence, her face tightening with every revelation, her fingers gripping the mug as if anchoring herself against the weight of it all. "I knew he was caught up with the company," she said when I finished, her voice heavy with regret. "But we've barely talked in months. Every time I call, he's rushing off to a meeting or promising to call back, and he never does. I had no idea it was this bad." I sighed, the truth settling between us. "He's changed, Olivia, or maybe this side of him was always there, and I was too blind to see it." She reached for her phone, her jaw set. "I'm calling him. This is unacceptable." I placed my hand over hers, gentle but firm. "You don't need to fight my battles, sweetheart." But Olivia's eyes flashed with determination. "This isn't just your battle, Mom. He's my brother, and he's hurt you. Worse, he lied to get me here, making me think you were falling apart when you're handling this with more strength than he could ever muster." Before I could stop her, she dialed Ryan's number and put the call on speaker. He answered almost instantly, his voice a mix of relief and urgency. "Olivia, thank God, are you with Mom? How is she?" Olivia's response was ice cold, cutting through his feigned concern. "She's sitting right next to me and she's perfectly fine," which you'd know if you'd been honest about what's really going on. There was a pause, heavy with tension. "I don't know what she's told you," Ryan began, but Olivia didn't let him finish. "She's told me everything, Ryan, with documentation to prove it. How could you? Mom supported you every step of the way, and this is how you repay her? Misusing funds, lying about the company, and then calling her a burden?" His protest was weak, defensive. "It wasn't like that. She's twisting things." Olivia's voice sharpened, a blade honed by betrayal. Don't you dare try to gaslight me the way you've been gaslighting her. I've seen the financial records, the emails, everything. You're the one who needs to explain." The silence that followed was suffocating. When Ryan spoke again, his tone had shifted, cold and calculating. "I see. She's turned you against me too." Olivia let out a sound of pure frustration, her hands trembling. "No one's against you, Ryan. We're your family. We want what's best for you, which means taking responsibility and treating Mom with the respect she deserves. But all you care about is her money." His response was blunt, stripped of pretense. "Right now, what's best for me is if Mom reconsiders canceling those transfers. Payroll's due next week." Olivia's face fell, the last flicker of hope draining from her eyes. She'd always been closer to me, but she'd held on to a bond with Ryan, believing in the brother she once knew. Now that illusion shattered. The weight of years spent nurturing her brother's dreams pressed heavily on Olivia's heart as she listened to Ryan's voice on the phone, stripped bare of any warmth, reducing their shared history to a cold transaction. Every word he spoke felt like a chisel chipping away at the bond she'd clung to through countless late-night talks, shared laughter, and quiet moments of support. Her chest tightened as she stood in the living room, the phone trembling slightly in her hand. She could feel the sting of betrayal rewriting every memory, every sacrifice she'd made to stand by him. The realization that Ryan saw their relationship as little more than a financial ledger left her reeling, as though the ground beneath her had shifted. "You know what, Ryan?" she said at last, her voice steady but laced with a quiet resolve that surprised even her. "Mom was right. I wouldn't trust you with another cent either." Before he could fire back, she ended the call, the silence that followed both deafening and liberating. Turning to me, her mother, her eyes shimmered with unshed tears, reflecting a mix of grief and an apology. "I'm so sorry, Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I never imagined he'd turn out this way." I opened my arms, pulling Olivia into a tight embrace, feeling the subtle tremors in her shoulders as she fought to hold herself together. My heart ached for her, for the brother she'd lost to greed, and for myself grappling with the same disillusionment. "Neither did I, sweetheart." "Neither did I thought, the words too heavy to speak aloud. That evening we found solace on the back porch, the sky painted in hues of amber and violet as the sun dipped below the horizon. The air was cool, carrying the faint scent of blooming jasmine from the garden. My phone buzzed, breaking the tranquil moment with an email from Daniel Cooper, a trusted colleague of Ryan's. The subject line, "You should know," sent a chill down my spine. I opened it to find a curt message. Ryan and his fiancée, Sophia, had jetted off to Bali the previous day, draining the last of Summit Solutions' accessible funds for their first-class tickets. Most of the team hadn't been paid this month, and Daniel, in quiet disgust, had resigned. Attached was a photo that twisted the knife deeper. Ryan and Sophia lounging in plush airline seats, clinking champagne glasses in a smug toast, Sophia's ostentatious diamond ring glinting under the cabin lights. I handed the phone to Olivia without a word, watching as her eyes scanned the email, then lingered on the photo. Her expression hardened, a slow shake of her head betraying her disbelief and anger. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, as though afraid of the answer. I turned my gaze to the garden where the rose bushes my late husband, James, and I had planted 2 decades ago still stood resilient. Those roses had weathered years of neglect when grief had stolen my energy for tending them. Yet they bloomed vibrantly, adapting to hardship with quiet grace. In that moment, I wondered if I, too, could find a way to thrive again. "Now we wait," I said simply, my voice calm but firm. "Ryan can either pull his company back from the brink with honest effort, or he can let it collapse under the weight of his choices. Either way, I'm done being his crutch." Olivia's hand found mine, her squeeze a silent vow of solidarity. "And us? You and me?" she asked, her eyes searching mine for reassurance. I smiled, a wave of gratitude washing over me for my daughter's unwavering loyalty. "We'll be just fine," I assured her. "Some bonds may fray or snap, but the ones that truly matter only grow stronger through trials like these." As night blanketed Portland, a strange peace settled over me, like a long-held breath finally released. For so long, I'd poured my energy into worrying about Ryan, propping up his ambitions while sidelining my own. The realization hit me with quiet clarity. It was time to rediscover Ellanor Wilson. The woman I'd been before loss and duty had reshaped my world. Sitting beside Olivia under a sky studded with emerging stars, I allowed myself to believe that whatever lay ahead, I was strong enough to face it. The challenges of tomorrow would come, but for tonight, this moment of connection with my daughter was enough. 3 weeks passed without a single word from Ryan, the silence from Seattle as oppressive as a storm cloud. Olivia had returned to Chicago after a long weekend with me, her departure leaving the house quieter, but her promise to visit soon lingering like a warm ember. Through Amanda, a mutual friend, I learned that Summit Solutions had spiraled further into chaos, missing payroll and losing several key employees. Daniel's occasional emails, brief but heavy with disappointment, kept me informed of the company's unraveling. One morning as I knelt in the garden, my hands deep in the soil, my phone rang, jarring me from the meditative rhythm of weeding. The caller ID flashed Marcus Wilson, my brother-in-law. "Ellanor," he said without preamble, his tone urgent. "Have you seen the news?" My pulse quickened. "What news? About Ryan? Summit Solutions?" Marcus sighed, the sound heavy with exasperation. "It's all over the tech blogs this morning." My heart stuttered. Is Ryan okay? I asked, dread pooling in my stomach. Physically, he's fine, Marcus reassured me. But his reputation? That's another story. The company's imploding, Ellanor, and it's very public. I sank onto the garden bench, my soil-caked gloves forgotten in my lap. Tell me everything, I urged. Marcus's voice grew grim as he recounted the scandal. Several employees had gone public, exposing missed paychecks while Ryan and Sophia cavorted in Bali. One whistleblower he had leaked emails revealing Ryan funneling exorbitant payments to Sophia's dubious consulting firm while denying requests for essential equipment. The betrayal cut deeper as Marcus continued, his tone softening with sympathy. There's more, Ellanor. Ryan's giving interviews, trying to spin the narrative. He's blaming you. My eyes widened, a cold fury igniting in my chest. Me? How could he possibly blame me? Marcus hesitated before explaining. He's claiming you abruptly pulled promised funding, leaving the company in crisis. He's painting himself as the victim of a family feud that tanked his business. The words landed like a slap. That's not what happened, I said, my voice low but trembling with anger. I know, Marcus said firmly. Anyone who knows you knows the truth. But the tech press is eating it up. Family drama, betrayal, a company in freefall. It's clickbait gold. I peeled off my gloves, my movements deliberate despite the storm raging inside me. Have you spoken to him? I asked. Marcus sighed again. I tried. He's not taking my calls, only talking to journalists, apparently. We spoke for a few more minutes, Marcus offering his unwavering support and promising to keep me posted. After hanging up, I lingered in the garden, the chirping of birds, a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart. Ryan wasn't just failing, he was trying to drag me down with him, casting me as the villain to salvage his pride. After all, I'd given money, time, faith. He was publicly betraying me. The sting of it was almost physical, a wound that throbbed with every beat of my heart. Inside, I opened my laptop, my fingers hesitating before searching for Summit Solutions. The articles were impossible to miss. Tech startup in crisis after family investor pulls funding. Summit Solutions. CEO claims mother's financial betrayal led to company's downfall. Family drama sinks promising environmental tech firm. Ryan's quotes were polished, calculated to make him sound bewildered and wronged. My mother was a steadfast supporter from the start, but something shifted. She grew controlling, insisting on micromanaging decisions despite lacking technical expertise. When I resisted, she retaliated by yanking the funding she'd pledged. Not a whisper about misusing company funds. No mention of the lavish consulting fees to Sophia. Nothing about their extravagant Bali getaway while employees went unpaid. The lies were so blatant, so brazen that I could barely breathe. I reached for my phone to call Amanda when it rang in my hand, an unfamiliar Seattle number flashing on the screen. Mrs. Wilson, a woman's voice asked when I answered, professional but tinged with curiosity. This is Jessica Ward from the Seattle Business Journal. I'm working on a story about Summit Solutions and was hoping to get your perspective on recent events. My grip tightened on the phone, my mind racing. This was my chance to set the record straight, to counter Ryan's narrative. But as I sat there, the garden's quiet resilience in the background, I wondered if speaking out would only fan the flames of this public spectacle. For now, I needed to think, to weigh my options. Ryan had made his move, but the game wasn't over. Whatever came next, I'd face it on my terms, with the strength I'd rediscovered in the ashes of his betrayal. The phone call from Miss Ward, a journalist with a knack for digging into family dramas, caught me off guard. My heart sank as her voice, polite yet probing, filled the line. My first instinct was to shut it down, to say nothing and let the storm pass. But the weight of silence pressed harder. Ryan, my own son, was out there spinning a tale that painted me as the villain in his company's collapse. If I stayed quiet, his version would stand unchallenged, a half-truth carved into the public's mind. I appreciate you reaching out, Miss Ward, I said, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. But I'll need to speak with my attorney before I can comment. Of course, she replied, her tone smooth as silk. But she wasn't done. Just one quick question. Your son claims you abruptly pulled promised funding, leaving Summit Solutions in financial ruin. Any response to that? The accusation stung, sharp and familiar. No comment at this time, I said firmly, feeling the walls of my resolve harden. Please direct any further questions to my attorney, Amanda Ross. I gave her Amanda's contact details, ended the call, and immediately dialed Amanda, my fingers shaking as I gripped the phone. The world felt like it was tilting, and I needed her calm, measured voice to anchor me. I was just about to call you, Amanda said, picking up on the first ring. I'm guessing you've seen the news. Ryan's interviews are everywhere, and he's not holding back. I exhaled, the air heavy with frustration. He's making me out to be some cold, manipulative mother who yanked his funding on a whim, Amanda did. It's like he's rewriting history to save himself. Her voice stayed even, a lifeline in the chaos. We saw this coming, Ellanor. That's why we documented every step, every agreement, every transaction. The question now is how you want to play this. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling as if it held answers. I don't know, I admitted, my voice softer now, raw with the conflict tearing at me. Part of me wants to scream the truth from the rooftops to show the world who he really is. But the other part, I trailed off, the ache in my chest deepening. He's still my son. Dragging him through the mud feels like betraying him, even after all this. I get it, Amanda said, her empathy cutting through the legal haze. But Ellanor, his accusations aren't just about Summit Solutions anymore. They're hitting your reputation. People you've worked with for decades are starting to whisper. You've seen the texts, haven't you? She was right. My phone had been buzzing all morning, messages from old colleagues, their words draped in concern but laced with doubt. Have you seen the articles? Is it true? Each one felt like a tiny betrayal, a crack in the trust I'd built over years of integrity. What do you think I should do? I asked, hating how lost I sounded. We've got choices, Amanda said, her voice shifting to strategist mode. We could release a concise statement, denying his claims without diving into the weeds. Or we could handpick documents and share them with trusted journalists to counter his lies point by point. If you're ready to go all in, we could arrange a full interview, lay out every piece of evidence, and shut this down for good. The options swirled in my mind, each one heavy with consequences. I need to think it over, I said, Vianio, but can you draft a statement just in case I decide to go that route? Already on it, she assured me. And Ellanor, try not to let this eat at you. Anyone who knows you, really knows you, will see right through his story. After we hung up, I couldn't sit still. I paced the house, my footsteps echoing in the quiet rooms. Ryan's betrayal cut deeper than I could have imagined. It wasn't just the lies he'd told me, the way he'd misused the funds I'd given him in good faith. It was the public spectacle he'd made of it, dragging our private pain into the spotlight to save his own skin. Every step I took felt like a battle to hold myself together, to keep the hurt from swallowing me whole. By afternoon, my phone was relentless. Calls, texts, notifications piling up like debris from a wreck. Friends reached out with unwavering support, their words of balm to my bruised heart. But others, distant relatives and casual acquaintances, asked questions that revealed their skepticism. What's going on with you and Ryan? Is there any truth to what he's saying? I was mid-response, crafting a diplomatic reply to one such message, when the doorbell rang. Peering through the peephole, I froze. Michael Sanders, the manager of the Portland branch of Pacific Northwest Trust, stood on my doorstep. My bank of choice for over 20 years, a place I'd always felt secure. What was he doing here? Michael, I said, opening the door, my voice betraying my unease. This is unexpected. Ellanor, he nodded, his expression strained. I'm sorry for showing up unannounced. I just thought this was better discussed face to face than over the phone. A knot tightened in my stomach as I led him to the living room. What's this about? I asked, sitting across from him, bracing for impact. He cleared his throat, clearly uneasy. I'll be up front. Your son visited our Seattle branch yesterday. He was adamant about accessing a joint account he said you two set up for business purposes. The words hit like a slap. There's no joint account, I said, my voice sharp with disbelief. My finances have always been separate from Summit Solutions, completely separate. Michael's shoulders relaxed slightly as if my words confirmed what he'd hoped. That's what our records show. But Ryan was Convincing. He even brought documents that appeared to have your signature, authorizing him as a co-signer on one of your accounts. A chill ran through me, cold and paralyzing. My signature? I whispered, the betrayal sinking in deeper. They didn't match our records, Michael said quickly. That's why the Seattle manager called me. We declined his request until we could verify further. I stared at him, the room blurring around the edges. He tried to forge my signature? The question felt surreal, like it belonged to someone else's life. Michael chose his words carefully. I can't say for certain that's what happened, but the discrepancy was significant enough to raise red flags. I nodded, my mind racing, trying to grasp the magnitude of what Ryan had done. Thank you for telling me no, I said, my voice sounding hollow even to me. I'll need to check all my accounts. That's a smart move, Michael agreed, his tone gentle. And Ellanor, I know this is tough. Ryan was emotional when he was denied access. He said some things that concerned the staff. My heart thudded. What did he say? He hesitated, clearly reluctant to repeat it. He suggested you might be experiencing cognitive decline, that you'd agreed to make the account joint but might have forgotten. He implied he was trying to protect you from financial missteps. The words landed like a blow, stealing my breath. The room seemed to spin. The sun I'd raised, the boy I'd poured my love and trust into, wasn't just blaming me for his failures. He was trying to paint me as incompetent, as someone who couldn't be trusted with my own mind. The audacity of it, it was staggering. A betrayal slicing through every memory I held dear. I assure you, Michael, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady, my cognitive functions are perfectly fine, intact. I never doubted that, he replied, his sincerity a small comfort. But I just thought you needed to know what he was said. After Michael left, I sat in the living room staring at nothing, my thoughts a tangled mess of shock and sorrow. How could Ryan do this? The son who I'd cheered for at every turn, who I'd supported through every dream and every stumble, was trying to dismantle my independence. It wasn't just about money, it was about my agency, my identity, the very core of who I was. The phone rang again. I answered mechanically, my voice flat. Amanda, it's me. I've been trying to reach you, Amanda said, her tone grim. There's been a development. I know Michael Sanders just there, about the bank incident. Yes, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Ryan tried to access my accounts. That's part of why I'm calling, she said, her words heavy with urgency. We've just received a letter from an attorney representing Ryan. Ellanor, he's threatening to petition for conservatorship. The word felt alien, jagged. Conservatorship? I repeated, my mind struggling to process it. On what grounds? Amanda's voice was tight with controlled anger. He's claiming your decision to pull funding from Summit Solutions was erratic, a sign of financial instability. He's also saying your refusal to communicate with family, his words, shows you're not in full control of your faculties. A laugh escaped me, sharp and brittle, teetering on the edge of something darker. The absurdity of it, Ryan using my own boundaries against me, twisting my strength into a weapon. The pain of his actions burned, but beneath it, a spark of defiance flared. I wasn't done fighting, not for my reputation, not for my independence, not for the truth. At 68, I'm as sharp as ever, not some frail old woman teetering on the edge of senility. My mind is clear, my health robust, and I manage my own affairs with a precision that would make most people half my age envious. Just this morning, I spent 20 minutes on the phone with Michael Sanders, my banker, untangling a web of complex financial matters with the ease of someone who's been doing it for decades. The idea that I'm losing my grip, hysteria they called it, is not just absurd, it's insulting. I live alone in my meticulously kept home, every bill paid on time, every decision made with careful deliberation. Yet here I am facing the unthinkable, my own son, Ryan, plotting to strip me of my autonomy. Amanda, my attorney, sat across from me in my living room, her expression a mix of concern and resolve. It's absurd, Ellanor, she said, her voice steady but tinged with urgency. This conservatorship petition would never hold up in court. You're the picture of independence, but even the act of filing it could do damage. It plants seeds of doubt, makes people whisper. They'll wonder if there's some truth to it, if you're not as capable as you seem. Her words hit me like a cold wind, stirring a storm of emotions I wasn't ready to face. I wanted to protest, to insist that Ryan, my Ryan, would never stoop so low. But the truth gnawed at me, sharp and relentless. The Ryan I thought I knew, the one I raised to be honest and kind, was gone. Or maybe he'd never existed at all. The son I loved wouldn't have siphoned company funds, lied to my face for months, or tried to forge my signature at the bank. Each betrayal felt like a blade, slicing through the memories of the one who used to cling to my hand, trusting me to guide him. I sank into my armchair, the weight of it all pressing against my chest. He wouldn't, I whispered, more to myself than to Amanda. But the words felt hollow, a desperate attempt to hold on to a version of my son that no longer existed. Amanda's gaze softened, but her voice remained firm. We need to act decisively, Ellanor. This isn't just about protecting your finances, it's about protecting you. Ryan's escalating. First, he blamed you publicly for Summit Solutions' collapse, painting you as the villain who pulled the plug. Now he's trying to seize control of your accounts through fraud. If we don't draw a line, he'll push further. She leaned forward, her hands clasped tightly. I propose we issue a public statement addressing the Summit Solutions debacle. Clear, factual, and unapologetic. We should also send documentation of Ryan's attempted bank fraud to his attorney, making it crystal clear that any move toward a conservatorship will trigger immediate counteraction, including potential criminal charges. The words criminal charges landed like a thunderclap. My own son facing a courtroom, maybe a cell. The thought made my stomach churn, a mix of grief and disbelief swirling inside me. Against Ryan? I echoed, my voice trembling with the weight of it. Amanda's expression softened further, her eyes reflecting the pain she knew I was feeling. I know how hard this is, Ellanor. He's your son, but he's not the boy you raised anymore. He's crossed lines, serious ones. We need to establish boundaries, not just for your sake, but to stop him from spiraling further. I closed my eyes, exhaustion settling over me like a heavy fog. My heart ached for the son I'd lost, for the family we used to be. But Amanda was right. I couldn't let sentiment cloud my judgment. Do what you need to, I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. I trust you to handle this. Over the next 2 days, Amanda worked with relentless focus, coordinating with the bank to compile irrefutable evidence of Ryan's attempted fraud. She drafted a formal letter to his attorney, its tone sharp and uncompromising, and prepared a public statement that refuted Ryan's accusations without exposing the full extent of his betrayal. I stayed home, cocooned in the quiet of my house, avoiding the outside world. Friends called, their voices brimming with concern, but I couldn't bear to recount the story. Each ring of the phone felt like an intrusion, a reminder of the scandal threatening to engulf me. I wanted to shut it all out, to pretend none of this was happening, but the truth was inescapable. On Thursday morning, the doorbell jolted me from my thoughts. Peering through the peephole, I saw Sophia Chen standing on my porch, her posture as polished as ever. My first instinct was to ignore her, to let her stand there until she gave up and left. What could she possibly say that I'd want to hear? She'd been Ryan's partner in this mess, profiting from my investments while whispering poison about me behind my back. But curiosity, or maybe a flicker of anger, got the better of me. I opened the door, standing firmly in the threshold, my body a silent barrier. Mrs. Wilson, Sophia said, her voice smooth as silk but laced with a tension I hadn't heard before. Thank you for seeing me. May I come in? I don't think that's appropriate, I replied, my tone icy. What do you want, Sophia? She was dressed impeccably, her tailored suit pristine, her hair perfectly in place. But there was something off, a tightness around her eyes, a forced quality to her smile that betrayed her unease. I wanted to speak with you directly, she said, her words carefully measured. There's been so much miscommunication, so many misunderstandings. I thought we could clear the air. Miscommunication? I repeated, my voice sharp with disbelief. The word felt like a mockery, a flimsy excuse for the chaos she and Ryan had unleashed. Is that what you call Ryan publicly blaming me for Summit Solutions' failure? Or his attempt to forge my signature at the bank? Or maybe the threat of a conservatorship to strip me of my rights? Which misunderstanding would you like to address first? For a moment, her polished facade cracked. A flicker of something, anger perhaps, or fear, crossed her face before she regained her composure. Ryan's under immense pressure, she said, her voice softening but still calculated. The company's collapse has been devastating for him. He's not thinking clearly. And you? I pressed, my eyes narrowing. Were you not thinking clearly when you pocketed hundreds of thousands in consulting fees for services no one can verify? Or when jetted off to Bali in first class while Summit's employees went unpaid? Her expression hardened, the mask slipping just enough to reveal the steel beneath. My services were legitimate, she said, her voice clipped. I secured countless connections for Summit, arranged meetings with potential investors. Investors who never materialize, I shot back, my anger rising. Curious, isn't it? She didn't flinch, but her smile tightened. Investment takes time, Mrs. Wilson. Relationships need to be cultivated. She paused, then added, as for Bali, it was a combined business and personal trip. We had meetings scheduled with potential partners in the Asian market. How convenient, I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. She sighed, shifting tactics, her tone softening as if she could charm her way out of this. Mrs. Wilson, I didn't come to argue. I came to propose a solution that could benefit everyone. I raised an eyebrow, keeping my expression neutral. I'm listening. She studied me, gauging my reaction before continuing. Ryan and I have been exploring options. Summit Solutions still has valuable intellectual property, promising technology. With the right backing, it could succeed. We've had interest from a group of investors in San Francisco, but they're concerned about the company's financial state and the family complications. She paused, letting the words hang in the air. They'd be willing to invest if certain conditions are met. One is resolving the conflict with you. If you issued a statement clarifying that your withdrawal of funding was part of a planned transition, not due to mismanagement, and if you'd consider a small bridge loan to stabilize the company until their investment comes through. A bridge loan? I cut in, unable to hide my incredulity. You're standing on my porch asking for more money? Her eyes flickered with something, desperation maybe, but she pressed on. Not for me, Mrs. Wilson, for the company, for Ryan's future, for the employees who still believe in the mission. I studied her, this woman who'd profited from my trust, who'd stood by while Ryan betrayed me, who now had the gall to ask for more. The employees Ryan couldn't be bothered to pay while you two were sipping champagne in Bali? I said, my voice low and cutting. Those employees? Her composure faltered, her lips pressing into a thin line. That trip was a mistake, she admitted, her voice quieter now. But everyone makes mistakes, Mrs. Wilson. Even you. Indeed, I said, my tone cold but steady. My mistake was trusting Ryan when he said he just needed a little more time, a little more money. My mistake was not seeing sooner how you and he were mismanaging my investment, exploiting it for your own gain. My mistake was believing in a son who no longer exists. Her eyes flashed with defiance, but I didn't give her a chance to respond. So, you'll let Summit Solutions fail? She challenged. Everything Ryan's worked for, everything you've invested, you'll let it all go to waste over pride? Not pride, I corrected, my voice firm. Principle. In the quiet of my home, a place that once felt like a sanctuary, I stood at a crossroads I never imagined I'd face. The weight of my choices, my sacrifices, pressed heavily on my chest, as if the air itself had thickened with the ache of lost dreams. I had poured everything into supporting Ryan's vision, his ambition to build Summit Solutions into something remarkable. I gave him my trust, my resources, my unwavering belief, even when it meant setting aside my own sense of self-worth and pride. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of those precious things, my self-respect, my dignity, blinded by the hope that my son would soar. But now, standing in the wreckage of that hope, I had rediscovered them, fragile but resolute, and they burned brighter within me than any fleeting success of a business ever could. Sophia's voice cut through the air like a blade, sharp and deliberate, her eyes narrowing into slits of accusation. Ryan was right about you, she sneered, her words dripping with venom. You're nothing but a controlling old woman who can't stand to see her son succeed without your leash around his neck. You'd rather watch him crash and burn than admit you were wrong. Her words were meant to wound, to unravel me, but instead, a strange calm settled over me, like a cool tide washing away the sting. I saw her tactics for what they were, a desperate, calculated attempt to seize control, to bend me to her will. I met her gaze, unflinching, and spoke with a quiet resolve that surprised even me. Goodbye, Sophia. The door clicked shut, a soft but final sound that echoed in the stillness of my home. Through the peephole, I watched her linger on the porch, her face a kaleidoscope of emotions, disbelief morphing into anger, her lips twisting as if she could will the door to reopen. Her movements were stiff, each step toward her car radiating suppressed rage, as though she carried the weight of her own unraveling narrative. I turned away, my heart heavy but steady, only to be jolted by the buzz of my phone. A text from Jacob Pierce lit up the screen. Ellanor, have you seen this? Just posted on TechWire. Attached was a link that made my breath catch. A headline screaming, Summit Solutions founder accuses mother of elder financial abuse. My hands trembled as I opened the article, each word a fresh wound. The piece was a masterclass in distortion, quoting an anonymous source close to the company who claimed I had coerced Ryan into accepting loans with predatory terms, then wielded my financial influence to meddle in decisions I had no right to touch. When Ryan, portrayed as the noble underdog, had dared to resist, I had allegedly turned vindictive, withdrawing my support with the intent to sabotage the company. The article went further, painting a chilling portrait of me as a manipulative matriarch with a history of financial control, casting Ryan as the long-suffering victim who had only now summoned the courage to break free. It was a breathtaking lie, a complete inversion of the truth that left me reeling. As I read, I could almost see Sophia's fingerprints on every line. The careful phrasing, the strategic use of terms like elder financial abuse, designed to provoke outrage. The sanctimonious depiction of Ryan as both martyr and hero. I sank onto the sofa, my phone slipping from fingers gone numb with shock. This wasn't just about deflecting blame anymore. They were waging war on my reputation, my relationships, perhaps even my financial independence, all to shield their own failures. Summit Solutions hadn't crumbled because of my betrayal. It had faltered under their mismanagement, their reckless ambition. And yet, they had spun a narrative so audacious it threatened to rewrite my very existence. The doorbell rang again, sharp and intrusive. Peering through the peephole, I saw not Sophia's venomous glare, but a young woman with a press badge, her notebook poised like a weapon. Behind her, a man with a camera lurked at the base of the porch steps, ready to capture my unraveling. I stepped back, drawing the curtains tight across the windows, sealing myself in. My home, once a haven, now felt like a fortress under siege. My privacy had been breached, my character publicly assassinated by the son I had raised, loved, believed in. The phone rang. Amanda, my confidant, her voice steady but urgent. I've seen it, I said, my tone surprisingly calm despite the storm raging within. The TechWire article. We need to respond, Amanda said, cutting straight to the point. Not just a statement this time, a full interview with documentation to back us up. They've escalated this, Ellanor. Silence will be read as guilt. I nodded, though she couldn't see me, the decision crystallizing in that moment. I agree, I said. Mount it up. Pick the outlet you think is best. I'm ready to tell my side. Amanda hesitated, her voice softening. Are you sure? Once we go public, there's no turning back. Your relationship with Ryan. What relationship? I cut in, a sudden clarity slicing through the fog of grief. My son tried to forge my signature to access my accounts. He's accused me of financial abuse in front of the world. He's trying to paint me as unhinged to seize control of my assets. I'm not the one who destroyed this, Amanda. She was silent for a moment, absorbing the weight of my words. I'll make the arrangements, she said finally. In the meantime, don't talk to anyone. Not journalists, not friends, not even family, until we have a plan. After we hung up, I sat in the dim light of my living room, the occasional chime of the doorbell, marking the arrival of more reporters, each one hungry for a soundbite to fuel the growing scandal. My phone buzzed relentlessly with messages from friends and former colleagues, some offering support, others tinged with doubt, unsure what to believe. I ignored them all. Instead, I did something I'd avoided for weeks, something that felt like opening a wound. I opened my phone's photo gallery and began scrolling through memories of Ryan. There he was, beaming at his college graduation, his cap slightly askew, his smile radiant with pride and possibility. Another photo captured him with Daniel at Summit Solutions launch, their arms slung around each other's shoulders, their faces alight with hope and determination. I lingered on an image of Ryan showing me around their first real office, his excitement infectious as he gestured to each desk, mapping out his vision for the team. In every photo, I searched his face for traces of the betrayal that had unfolded, some hint of deception I'd missed, some red flag I'd been too blind to see. Had he always carried this capacity for cruelty, or had something shifted, warped by ambition and Sophia's influence, until he could turn against the mother who had given him everything? I might never know. Each image was a stab of grief, as sharp and raw as the day I lost James, my husband. The Ryan in these photos, the boy I'd raised, the man I'd believed in, was gone, replaced by a stranger wearing at his face but lacking his heart, his integrity. It was a loss as profound as death, a different kind of mourning that demanded its own reckoning, its own slow journey toward acceptance. The doorbell rang again, more insistent now, pulling me from my reverie. I moved to the window, parting the curtains just enough to glimpse the porch. Olivia stood there, her face a mix of worry and fierce determination, a beacon in the storm. I hurried to the door, opening it just enough for her to slip inside before locking it again. "Mom," she said, wrapping me in a fierce embrace that anchored me against the chaos. "I came as soon as I saw the article. I can't believe it. How dare he? How dare they?" I held my daughter tightly, drawing strength from her unwavering loyalty, her presence a reminder that not all was lost. "I'm so glad you're here," I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. Olivia pulled back, her doctor's gaze assessing me with concern. "You look exhausted," she said. "Have you been eating? Sleeping?" A small, bittersweet laugh escaped me. "I'm supposed to be the one asking those questions." "Not today," she said firmly, guiding me toward the kitchen with a gentle but unyielding hand. "Today I'm taking care of you." As Olivia glided through my kitchen with the effortless grace of someone who knew every corner of it, brewing tea and piecing together a modest meal from the sparse contents of my fridge, a quiet transformation stirred within me. The sting of betrayal still lingered, sharp and unrelenting, like a wound that refused to close. Yet beneath that pain, a new fire kindled, a fierce resolve to take back my story, my dignity, my life. Ryan and Sophia had unleashed a calculated assault, banking on my collapse, expecting me to crumble under their pressure or bow to their demands to avoid a public clash. They thought I'd retreat into silence, but they misjudged me. They underestimated the unyielding loyalty of Daniel, the meticulous oversight of the bank, and the safeguards woven into the legal system for someone in my position. Most critically, they failed to grasp the quiet, unshakable power that flows from standing in truth, from holding fast to integrity, even when it costs everything. Tomorrow, I would lay bare my story, every detail backed by evidence, delivered with the steady calm of someone with nothing to conceal. Let the world decide who wore the victim's mantle and who played the villain in this twisted saga. For the first time since this nightmare began, I wasn't just bracing myself. I was ready, ready to fight, ready to triumph, ready to emerge from this fire forged anew, stronger than ever. Olivia, as if sensing the shift in my spirit, set a steaming mug of tea before me and gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze. "He picked the wrong woman to cross, didn't he?" she said, her voice warm with a conviction. I placed my hand over hers, a faint smile breaking through the weight of the moment. "He certainly did," I murmured, my voice steady with newfound certainty. The offices of the Portland Business Review stood in a sleek, glass-walled tower in the heart of downtown, offering sweeping views of the Willamette River and the city's shimmering skyline. As Amanda and I were ushered into a conference room for my interview, a surprising calm settled over me. After days spent fending off attacks, reacting to each new blow, I was finally stepping into the driver's seat of my own narrative. Carolyn Winters, the journalist Amanda had chosen for this exclusive, was a seasoned business reporter whose reputation for meticulous research and fair-minded coverage preceded her. Her dark hair, streaked with silver, was swept back into a neat ponytail, and her face, free of heavy makeup, radiated a no-nonsense focus on substance over flash. "Mrs. Wilson," she said, standing to offer a firm handshake, her eyes meeting mine with genuine interest. "Thank you for trusting me with your story. I've been following the Summit Solutions saga closely, and I'm eager to hear your side." I returned her handshake, my voice steady. "Thank you for giving me the chance to share it." I settled into a chair at the polished conference table, Amanda at my side, her folders of meticulously organized evidence spread out like a shield. A photographer snapped a few discreet shots before slipping out, leaving just Carolyn, her digital recorder, and us. Before diving in, Carolyn leaned forward, her tone earnest. "I want you to know I'm coming into this with an open mind. I've seen the reports in TechWire and other outlets, but I'm here to hear your account directly, along with any evidence you are willing to share." I nodded, a wave of gratitude washing over me. "That's all I could ask for," I said, my voice calm but resolute. For the next 2 hours, I unraveled the full story, my words measured but unflinching. I recounted my initial investment in Summit Solutions, a leap of faith in my son's vision. I described the monthly transfers that followed, each one meant to be a lifeline as the company found its footing. Then came the slow, sickening realization that funds were vanishing into thin air, siphoned off for purposes that didn't match the promises made. I spoke of Ryan's growing hostility when I dared to question him, his defensiveness sharpening into something colder, more personal. Amanda interjected at key moments, sliding documents across the table, bank statements tracing the transfers, emails from Ryan pleading for more funds for projects that never materialized, screenshots of his lavish social media posts from Bali while his employees scrambled for unpaid wages. Most damning was Daniel Cooper's sworn affidavit, a meticulous chronicle of the company's financial mismanagement and the exorbitant consulting fees funneled to Sophia's firm for work that barely existed. Carolyn's eyes widened as she scanned Daniel's statement. "This is extraordinarily detailed," she remarked, her pen pausing over her notepad. "Has Mr. Cooper faced any backlash for stepping forward?" Amanda fielded the question with her usual precision. "Ryan threatened a lawsuit for breach of confidentiality, but the legal ground for that is shaky at best, especially given the evidence of financial misconduct." Carolyn turned back to me, her expression probing but not unkind. "Mrs. Wilson, I need to address the most serious claim your son has made, that you tried to seize control of Summit Solutions, demanding a say in decisions despite lacking technical expertise." I met her gaze without wavering. My role was strictly as an investor overseeing my financial stake, which is standard for anyone in my position. I never meddled in technical choices or product development. I only asked questions when expenses didn't align with the business plans Ryan shared with me. "And what about his allegation that you abruptly cut off promised funding?" Carolyn pressed, her tone neutral but curious. I took a steadying breath. Those monthly transfers were never a blank check. They were emergency support to help the company stabilize. Each one was meant to be the last. But Ryan always came back with assurances they were almost there. After 18 months of this cycle, coupled with evidence of misappropriated funds and his personal disrespect toward me, I had no choice but to stop. Carolyn's brow furrowed as she jotted a note. "You mentioned personal disrespect. Could you share more about that?" The memory still ached, but I pushed through it. "During a family dinner, Ryan called me a burden, dismissing my concerns as though I were an inconvenience rather than his mother and investor. It wasn't just a slip, it was a reflection of how he saw me." My voice softened, but I pressed on. "Since then, he's escalated. He's tried to access my personal bank accounts with forged documents and even threatened to pursue conservatorship, claiming I'm mentally unfit, all because I refused to keep funding his failing business." Carolyn's expression shifted, a flicker of shock breaking through her professional composure. "That's a drastic step," she said, her voice quieter now. "Do you have evidence of these actions?" Amanda slid over two more documents. A statement from Michael Sanders at Pacific Northwest Trust confirming Ryan's unauthorized attempt to my accounts, and a letter from Ryan's attorney hinting at conservatorship proceedings. Carolyn reviewed them in silence, her expression growing more somber. After a moment, she looked up at me, her voice measured but piercing. "Mrs. Wilson, why do you think your son has gone to such extremes? Is this just about money, or is something deeper driving this?" The question lingered, heavy in the air, echoing the one I'd been turning over in my mind for weeks. I paused, searching for words to capture the tangle of emotions and motives. "I think it started with money," I said slowly, my voice thick with reflection. "He needed my funds to prop up a sinking business. But it's become something more tangled now. Ryan's built a story in his head where he's the victim, not the one accountable for Summit's failures. He's convinced himself I'm the obstacle, not his own choices." My words hung there, raw and honest, carrying the weight of a mother's grief for a son who had chosen a path of blame over truth. The collapse of Summit Solutions had left a bitter taste, and now the narrative being spun painted me as the villain, manipulative, unstable, vengeful. It was a calculated move, one that shielded Ryan from facing his own failures and moral shortcomings. Admitting his mismanagement, his ethical breaches, would have been too much for him to bear. Instead, he chose to rewrite the story, casting me as the antagonist in a drama of his own making. The weight of his betrayal sat heavy in my chest, a dull ache that flared every time I thought of the son I'd raised, the one I'd believed would carry forward with integrity. Sophia Chen, Ryan's fiancée, was no bystander in this unraveling. Her influence loomed large, undeniable. I'd pieced it together carefully, each fact a shard of glass cutting deeper. Her consulting firm had siphoned off hefty payments from Summit Solutions, yet the work she delivered was flimsy at best, a veneer of value that crumbled under scrutiny. Beyond the finances, Sophia had fueled Ryan's excesses, lavish purchases, reckless spending that drained the company faster than any poor decision I could have made. Worse still, she'd been the architect of the public campaign against me, shaping a story that turned my love for my son into something sinister. Every time I thought of her cool, calculated moves, a mix of anger and sorrow churned within me. How had Ryan fallen so far under her sway? The interview with Caroline stretched on for an hour, each question probing deeper into the wreckage of Summit Solutions and my relationship with Ryan. I kept my voice steady, my words precise, even as recounting Ryan's cruelties threatened to crack my composure. The memory of his attempt to push for a conservatorship, a move so cold it still left me reeling, stung like a fresh wound. Yet I refused to let emotion overtake me. The truth was my shield, and I wielded it with care, laying out the facts without embellishment. Still, beneath my calm exterior, a storm raged. Grief for the son I'd lost, frustration at the lies, and a quiet resolve to reclaim my dignity. When Caroline set down her pen, her gaze softened, and she asked a question that caught me off guard. "Mrs. Wilson, if Ryan were here now, what would you say to him?" The room seemed to still, the air thick with the weight of her words. For a moment I was silent, my mind sifting through years of memories. The boy who'd once looked to me for guidance, the man who'd turned away. When I spoke, my voice was low but firm. I'd tell him I love him, despite everything, that I still see the boy he was, the man I hoped he'd become. But I'd also say that love doesn't mean excusing his actions or enduring his cruelty. Reconciliation would demand honesty, accountability, real remorse, not more lies or manipulation. The words hung between us, raw and unfiltered, a mother's heart laid bare. Carolyn nodded, her expression one of quiet respect. "Thank you for your candor," she said. "The article will run tomorrow, in print and online, with prominent placement." As I left the interview, a mix of relief and apprehension settled over me. I'd spoken my truth, but I knew the storm was far from over. At a nearby cafe, Amanda and I sat at a corner table, coffee cups warming our hands as we decompressed. "You were incredible," Amanda said, her voice warm with admiration. Poised, articulate, completely believable. Carolyn was visibly moved, especially by the conservatorship attempt. I managed a small smile, stirring my coffee absently. "I just told the truth," I said. Amanda leaned forward, her eyes serious. The truth, Bo, delivered well is a force of its own. But Ellanor, brace yourself. Once this article hits, Ryan and Sophia won't stay quiet. Their response could be fierce, maybe even uglier than before. I nodded, my thoughts drifting to what might come next. What do you think they'll do? I asked. Amanda sighed, weighing her words. Best case? They see they're outmatched and back off, focusing on saving what's left of Summit Solutions or their reputations. Worst case, they double down. New accusations, more attempts to tear you down. Her words stirred a quiet determination in me. I'll be ready, I said, surprised by the steel in my voice. Whatever lay ahead, I wouldn't be blindsided again. The Portland Business Review article went live at 6 o'clock a.m. The 7 a.m., with the print edition hitting newsstands soon after. By 7 p.m., my phone was alive with notifications, messages, calls, shares across social media. Carolyn had crafted a masterpiece, thorough, balanced, and unflinching. The headline, Summit Solutions Collapse, a mother's investment in a son's betrayal, cut straight to the heart of the story. A sidebar laid out the timeline, backed by documents that left little room for doubt. Reading it, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sorrow. The truth was out, but at what cost? The response was overwhelming. Former colleagues reached out with support, their words a balm to wounds I hadn't realized were still raw. Friends who'd wavered now voiced outrage on my behalf, their anger at Ryan's actions mirroring my own. Even distant acquaintances sent messages, stunned by the depth of his betrayal. Each note chipped away at the isolation I'd felt, reminding me I wasn't alone in this fight. Just before noon, my phone rang again. Jessica Ward from the Seattle Business Journal. Her voice was brisk but tinged with urgency. Mrs. Wilson, I've read Caroline's article. New information has surfaced about Summit Solutions, and I'd like to discuss it with you. My pulse quickened. What kind of information? I asked, cautious. Several former employees have come forward, she said. They've backed up your claims and added details about the company's financial mismanagement. I'd love to do a follow-up piece if you were open to commenting. I glanced at my watch, recalling Amanda's advice to avoid statements without her present. I'll need to consult my attorney first. Can I call you back this afternoon? Jessica agreed, then hesitated. There's something else you should know. Ryan Wilson and Sophia Chen have left Seattle. Sources say they cleared out their apartment yesterday and left. No one knows whether they've gone. The news hit like a punch, stealing my breath. Left? I echoed. You mean they fled? Jessica's tone was grim. It looks that way. Creditors were closing in, including their landlord, who says Summit Solutions owed 3 months' rent. The timing, right before your article, feels deliberate. After hanging up, I sat frozen, the weight of Jessica's words sinking in. Ryan and Sophia hadn't just run from me. They'd fled the consequences of their actions entirely. No confrontation, no farewell, just a vanishing act cloaked in secrecy. Was it fear, guilt, or a calculated move to start over elsewhere? The questions swirled, unanswered, leaving a hollow ache in their wake. My phone rang again, snapping me from my thoughts. It was Olivia, my daughter, her voice tight with emotion. Mom, have you heard? Ryan's gone. I frowned, confused. How did you know? She exhaled sharply. Daniel called me. He went to the office this morning and found it half empty. Computers gone, files missing. Then he checked Ryan's apartment, and the doorman said they moved out yesterday, loaded everything into a rental truck. My heart sank further. Did he say where they went? I asked. No, but he mentioned Sophia has family ties in California. Mom, I think they planned this all along. The attacks on you, the media smear, it was all a distraction while they prepared to disappear. The realization settled like a stone in my chest. Every accusation, every cruel maneuver, the attempted bank fraud, the conservatorship threats had been a smokescreen. Ryan and Sophia hadn't just betrayed me, they'd orchestrated a calculated escape, using lies to buy time. The truth, now laid bare, was both a victory and a wound. My son was gone, not just from my life, but from the life he'd built, leaving behind a trail of ruin and unanswered questions. The sting of betrayal lingered like a bitter aftertaste as I sat in my quiet Seattle home, replaying the events that had unraveled my family. Ryan, my son, and Sophia, his business partner, had orchestrated a scheme that now seemed painfully clear. Their request for a bridge loan during Sophia's visit months ago hadn't been a desperate plea to save their struggling company. Summit Solutions, it was a calculated move to extract more money from me before they disappeared. The realization settled heavily in my chest, a mix of anger and sorrow swirling within me. Their relentless attacks, both personal and public, had been designed to push me to the edge, to make me so desperate for peace that I'd pay any price to end the conflict. When that didn't work, they took what they could and fled, leaving behind a trail of broken trust and unanswered questions. Olivia's voice trembled over the phone as she asked, "What are you going to do now?" Her question hung in the air, heavy with the weight of our shared loss. I paused, staring out the window at the gray Seattle sky, searching for an answer that felt right. "Nothing," I said at last, my voice steady but soft. "At least, nothing more than what's already in motion." I had spoken my truth, laid bare the facts of Ryan's betrayal in the Portland Business Review article. The legal steps we'd taken, filing claims against Summit Solutions and securing my position as a creditor, would move forward, whether Ryan and Sophia were in Seattle or halfway across the globe. If they had truly fled, as it seemed, their absence only validated my stance. Pursuing them for a confrontation felt pointless, like chasing a shadow that would only slip further away. "Why drag out the pain?" I asked Olivia gently. "Ryan's made his choices over and over again. None of them point to wanting real reconciliation." Olivia fell silent, and I could feel her hurt through the line, sharp and raw. "I just can't believe he'd leave like that," she whispered, her voice cracking. Not even a word to me. My heart ached for her. Ryan hadn't just betrayed me, he'd abandoned his sister, leaving her to grapple with the wreckage of his actions without so much as a goodbye. The weight of his absence pressed down on us both, but Olivia's pain cut deeper. She had always looked up to her brother, believed in him even when doubts crept in. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart," I murmured, wishing I could reach through the phone and hold her. "This hurts you too, and I hate that." She took a shaky breath, her voice firming with resolve. "I'll be okay, Mom, and you will too. We've still got each other." Her words, simple yet fierce, warmed me, a reminder that not all was lost. After we hung up, I wandered through the house, my footsteps echoing in the stillness. I paused in the living room where family photos lined the shelves and walls like silent witnesses to happier times. There was Ryan, grinning on a beach vacation, his arms slung around Olivia during her high school graduation, the three of us laughing at a holiday dinner. Each image felt like a shard of glass, beautiful but sharp, cutting with the question I couldn't escape. Had it all been a lie? Had Ryan always carried this capacity for betrayal? Or had something broken inside him, twisting him into someone I no longer recognized? I traced a finger over a photo of him as a boy, his eyes bright with dreams, and wondered where that child had gone. The uncertainty gnawed at me, but I knew I might never have answers. What I did know was that I had given Ryan everything a mother could. I'd poured my heart into supporting his ambitions, offering not just financial backing, but unwavering belief in his potential. When he and Sophia launched Summit Solutions, I'd been their biggest cheerleader, investing my savings and my trust. But that trust had been exploited, my support twisted into a weapon against me. When I set boundaries, demanding accountability for the misused funds, Ryan responded with hostility, launching public attacks that painted me as the villain. Through it all, I'd held my ground, defending myself with honesty and dignity. Whatever came next, whether Ryan resurfaced with regret or vanished forever, I could face it knowing I'd acted with integrity. The weeks that followed felt like a strange limbo, as if time itself were holding its breath. The media frenzy around my conflict with Ryan gradually faded, replaced by a broader narrative about Summit Solutions' collapse. Former employees and partners began sharing their own stories of mismanagement, broken promises, and ethical failures. Daniel Cooper, Ryan's longtime friend and colleague, gave a candid interview to TechWire, laying bare the company's downward spiral. His words echoed my own claims about misappropriated funds, and his regret was palpable. "I should have spoken up sooner," he admitted, his voice heavy with guilt. I was loyal to Ryan, even when the evidence was staring me in the face. Daniel's honesty stirred a mix of gratitude and sorrow in me. Gratitude for his courage, sorrow for the loyalty that had blinded him. Ryan and Sophia, meanwhile, remained ghosts. Jessica Ward, a journalist who'd been covering the story, confirmed through her sources that they'd fled to San Francisco, where Sophia reportedly had tech industry connections. But their silence was deafening. Phone calls went unanswered, emails bounced back, and their social media accounts had vanished. Amanda Ross, my attorney, kept me updated on the legal front. The default notice on the original loan had been processed, cementing my status as a primary creditor if Summit Solutions entered bankruptcy. My claim on the company's intellectual property, potentially its most valuable asset, was now legally binding. Full recovery is unlikely, Amanda warned during one of our calls, her tone pragmatic. But if the tech is acquired by another company, you might see some return. I nodded, though the money had never been my focus. It's about the principle, I told her, my voice firm. It always was. Slowly, life began to find a new rhythm. I returned to my volunteer work at the Portland Botanical Gardens, finding solace in the quiet beauty of the plants. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected during the chaos, their warmth and laughter a balm for my bruised heart. I even started planning a European trip I'd shelved when Ryan first approached me for investment, a small act of reclaiming my life. Olivia visited when her schedule allowed, and we navigated our relationship with care, rebuilding it without Ryan as its anchor. It wasn't the same. There were moments when his absence felt like a physical ache. But we adapted, finding new ways to connect, new stories to share. We were mother and daughter in a changed world, but we were still us. Then, 1 month after the Portland Business Review article, an email arrived that stopped me cold. The sender was unfamiliar, Victoria Cooper, with an address from a generic email service. The subject line was stark, information about Ryan and Sophia. I stared at it, my pulse quickening, torn between curiosity and dread. Did I want to know what Victoria, presumably Daniel's wife, had to say? After several minutes, I clicked it open, bracing myself. Dear Mrs. Wilson, the email began, we haven't met, though I feel I know you through Daniel's stories. I'm Victoria Cooper, Daniel's wife. I hope you'll forgive this unexpected message, but I have information I believe you deserve to know. She explained that she and Daniel had stayed in Seattle after Summit Solutions' collapse, with Daniel consulting for tech firms while planning his next move. At a recent networking event, he'd run into Joseph Chen, Sophia's father. According to Victoria, Joseph had sought Daniel out to discuss Summit Solutions, driven by a version of events Sophia had fed her family. In her telling, she was the hero who tried to save the company from Ryan's recklessness, even investing her own family's money only to see it squandered. Joseph was probing for details about the company's assets and liabilities, convinced his daughter had been manipulated by Ryan. Daniel had set the record straight, Victoria wrote, clarifying that I, not Sophia, was the primary investor, and that Sophia's consulting services had been dubious at best. But the most alarming revelation was about Ryan and Sophia's current plans. Joseph had let slip that they were in San Francisco, pitching a new venture to investors. The technology they were touting, described as proprietary environmental solutions, bore a striking resemblance to Summit Solutions' core products. The news hit me like a punch, a mix of outrage and exhaustion washing over me. Were they truly attempting to rebuild on the ashes of their betrayal, using the very technology I'd helped fund? The thought left me reeling, uncertain whether to feel vindicated or violated anew. The email from Victoria Cooper landed in my inbox like a stone dropped into still water, rippling through my carefully guarded calm. As I read her words, a mix of dread and weary resignation settled over me. She described monitoring systems that Daniel, her colleague, had uncovered. Systems that bore an unmistakable resemblance to the technology developed at Summit Solutions, my son Ryan's failed venture. The company I had poured my savings into, believing in his vision, was now being resurrected under a new name, with intellectual properties that rightfully belonged to Summit Solutions and, by extension, to me as its primary creditor. Victoria's tone was gentle but firm, her words laced with empathy for the pain this revelation would cause. Daniel, she wrote, was consumed by guilt for not seeing the signs earlier, for not stopping Ryan and his partner, Sophia Chen, before they could exploit the technology I had funded. She offered her support, her contact information, a quiet invitation to lean on her if I needed to. I read the email twice, each word sinking deeper into my chest, stirring a storm of emotions, anger, betrayal, but also a mother's stubborn hope that there was still some explanation, some misunderstanding. My hands trembled as I forwarded the message to Amanda, my attorney, with a brief note asking for her thoughts. Within the hour, she responded, requesting a meeting at her office the next morning. The speed of her reply only heightened my unease, as if she too sensed the gravity of what we were facing. When I arrived at Amanda's office, the air felt charged with anticipation. She wasn't alone. Beside her sat Martin Reynolds, a distinguished man in his 60s with sharp eyes and a calm, authoritative presence. Amanda introduced him as a specialist in intellectual property law, and the weight of his expertise told me this was no ordinary meeting. We settled into the conference room, the polished table reflecting the morning light, and Amanda got straight to the point. "Ellanor," she began, her voice steady but laced with concern. "Martin has reviewed the technical details Daniel provided. This situation has escalated beyond our initial strategy." Martin leaned forward, his expression grave but not unkind. "Based on Daniel's documentation," he said, "it's clear that Ryan and Mrs. Chen are attempting to commercialize technology developed at Summit Solutions during the period of your investment. The similarities between their IT systems and Summit's proprietary technology are too precise to be coincidental." His words landed like a verdict, and I felt a familiar ache in my chest. The sting of betrayal, sharper now because it came from my own son. "What does this mean for me?" I asked, my voice quieter than I intended, as if speaking too loudly might make the reality more real. Martin's response was measured but unflinching. "It means they're potentially violating intellectual property rights. As the primary creditor of Summit Solutions, you have a legitimate claim to the company's IP portfolio. If they're using that technology without proper acquisition or licensing, they're essentially stealing assets that belong to you." The word stealing hung in the air, heavy and accusatory. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to steady myself against the flood of emotions, disappointment, anger, and a deep, aching sadness that Ryan could do this to me, to us. "What are our options?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. The thought of confronting Ryan, of dragging my own son into a legal battle, felt like a weight pressing down on my heart. Amanda and Martin exchanged a glance, a silent acknowledgement of the delicate line we were walking. "We could send a cease and desist letter," Amanda said, her tone professional but not without compassion. "It would warn them that we're aware of the infringement and demand they stop immediately. If they ignore it, we could file for an injunction to block their use of the technology while we prepare a more comprehensive lawsuit." The word lawsuit tasted bitter on my tongue, a jagged edge to the already fraying bond between me and Ryan. "A lawsuit," I repeated more to myself than to them, the idea of suing my son twisting like a knife. Martin's expression softened, his years of experience likely familiar with the human toll of legal battles. "I understand this is difficult," he said gently, "but from a legal perspective, their actions aren't just ethically questionable, they're potentially criminal. They're attempting to profit from stolen intellectual property while the legitimate creditors, including you, are left with nothing." I leaned back in my chair, my mind spinning. Ryan had already taken so much, my trust, my investment, my belief in his potential. And now this, the technology I had funded, the countless late nights I'd spent worrying about the company's future, the hope I'd poured into his dreams. It was all being repurposed, repackaged, and sold as if I'd never existed. "There's another angle to consider," Amanda added, her voice pulling me back to the room. "If Ryan and Sophia secure investment for this new venture using Summit's technology, those investors could find themselves entangled in our legal claims. By acting now, we might prevent a larger, more complicated battle later." Her words made sense, but they did little to ease the turmoil in my heart. "I need time to think," I said finally, my voice thick with emotion. "This isn't just a legal decision, it's personal. Amanda and Martin nodded, their silence a gesture of respect for the weight I was carrying. As I left the office, the world outside felt muted, as if the colors had dulled. My thoughts churned, torn between the mother who wanted to protect her son and the woman who could no longer ignore his betrayal. Every instinct urged me to find a way to reach Ryan, to pull him back from this path of deception. But the evidence was undeniable. He and Sophia were not only exploiting my investment, but also stealing the very technology it had created. That evening, I sat in my garden, the sunset casting a warm glow over the flowers I'd tended for years. The pinks and golds in the sky should have been soothing, but they only deepened my sense of loss. My phone rang, the unfamiliar San Francisco area code sending a jolt of apprehension through me. I answered, bracing myself. "Mom," Ryan's voice came through, instantly recognizable despite the weeks of silence. It was the voice I'd heard through childhood tantrums, teenage arguments, and fleeting moments of pride. "It's me." "Ryan," I said, keeping my tone neutral, though my heart was pounding. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you." His response was cautious, not a question, but a statement. "So you know where I am?" I didn't deny it. "Yes." A pause stretched between us, heavy with unspoken tension. "I suppose Daniel told you," he said, a hint of bitterness in his voice. "He always was more loyal to you than to me." "Daniel has acted with integrity," I countered, my voice sharp despite my effort to stay calm. "Which is more than I can say for you." The silence that followed was thick, charged with the weight of everything left unsaid. When Ryan spoke again, his tone softened, carrying a trace of the boy I'd raised, the one who used to confide in me. "Mom, I know things got out of hand. The articles, the allegations, it all spiraled. I never meant for it to go this far." "And yet you left without a word," I said, the hurt rising to the surface. "You packed up and disappeared. Not exactly the actions of someone who feels remorse." His response was quick, almost desperate. "I needed space, Mom. Time to think, to regroup." Summit Solutions was falling apart, and I couldn't see a way forward. The words stung, not because they were untrue, but because they were an excuse, a deflection from the truth I now knew. "So you decided to start over in San Francisco," I said, my voice steady but laced with accusation, "using technology developed at Summit Solutions." His sharp intake of breath told me he hadn't expected me to know. "It's not what you think," he began, but I cut him off. "Isn't it? Because what I think is that you're trying to profit from intellectual property that legally belongs to your creditors, chief among them, me." My words hung in the air, sharp and unyielding. I could feel the weight of them, the finality of calling you out his actions so directly. "The core technology was my idea," Ryan protested, his voice rising with a mix of defensiveness and frustration. "My vision, my design concepts." I didn't let him off that easily. "Developed with my money," I reminded him, my tone firm, "in a company where I was the primary investor. The legal reality doesn't change just because you've crossed state lines, Ryan." Silence stretched between us, tense and heavy, filled with unspoken accusations and defenses he didn't dare voice. Finally, he sighed, a sound that carried exhaustion and something close to resignation. "What do you want, Mom?" It was the first time he'd asked that question, the first time he'd considered what I needed rather than what he could take. The shift was small but significant, a crack in the wall he'd built between us. "I want what I've always wanted," I said, my voice softening with the truth of it. "For you to take responsibility for your actions and to make amends where possible, to become the man I know you are capable of being." "And legally?" he pressed, his tone cautious, as if bracing for the worst. "Are you planning to sue me?" The question hung between us, raw and vulnerable. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision before me. "That depends on you," I said, my voice steady but heavy with the pain of what might come next. "My attorney believes I have strong grounds for legal action regarding the intellectual property. But what I want most isn't a courtroom battle. It's for you to do the right thing." The line went quiet again, and in that silence I felt the chasm between us, widened by betrayal but not yet impossible to bridge. I wanted to believe there was still a way back, a way for Ryan to step into the light of accountability and rebuild what had been broken. But as I sat there, the sunset fading into twilight, I knew the path forward would be anything but simple. As twilight deepened over my garden, I sat on the porch, the weight of my conversation with Ryan still lingering in the air. The stars were just beginning to pierce the indigo sky, each one a quiet reminder of time's relentless march forward. My mind churned, replaying the tense exchange we'd had over the phone. I'd spent the evening wrestling with the question of what resolution I could accept, something that honored my sense of justice without dragging us through the courts. The answer, when it came, felt both heavy and clear. I wanted Ryan to formally acknowledge the debt he owed me, to agree to a repayment plan tied to the success of his new venture, and to publicly retract the baseless accusations he'd hurled my way. His silence on the other end of the line had stretched so long, I thought the call might have dropped. When he finally spoke, his voice was cautious, almost brittle, as if he were testing unfamiliar ground. "I need to think about this. Talk to Sophia," he'd said. I agreed, but not without a warning. "Don't take too long, Ryan. Now that I know what you're doing, I can't just ignore it. There will be consequences if you don't address this." His parting words, awkward and halting, "Thanks for taking my call," echoed in my mind as I sat there, the night air cool against my skin. The conversation had been brief, taut with unspoken history, and far from conclusive. Yet, as I watched the stars multiply, a strange lightness settled over me. It wasn't because I believed Ryan had suddenly seen the light or was ready to make amends. That kind of change, if it ever came, would demand time and effort he hadn't yet shown. No, the relief stemmed from something deeper, more personal. For the first time since this ordeal began, I hadn't approached Ryan as the heartbroken mother desperate to save her son, nor as the wounded victim of his betrayal. I had spoken as a woman grounded in her own strength, clear in her boundaries, unwavering in her expectations. That clarity felt like a lifeline, a tether to the life I was painstakingly rebuilding. Whatever lay ahead, reconciliation or further conflict, I would face it with the same resolve. Ryan's choices were his own burden now, not mine. My duty was to myself, to my integrity, to the careful steps I was taking toward healing. As full darkness enveloped the garden, I stood, leaving the porch light on, a remnant of maternal habit from when my children were young, stumbling home late. Some instincts, it seemed, lingered even when the world had shifted beyond recognition. But my future, my peace, didn't hinge on Ryan's return. It was illuminated by my own inner resolve, steady and unyielding, no matter what path he chose. The next morning, sunlight poured through the windows of my favorite cafe in downtown Portland, casting warm patterns across the wooden floor. I arrived early, claiming a corner table that offered both privacy and a clear view of the entrance. The familiar hum of the espresso machine and the murmur of quiet conversation wrapped around me like a comforting blanket as I cradled a steaming mug of Earl Grey. At exactly 10:01, the door swung open and Ryan stepped inside. He looked different, gaunt, with shadows pooling under his eyes, his once confident stride replaced by a tentative shuffle. The sight stirred a pang of sorrow in me, but I pushed it aside. He spotted me and made his way over, his movements stiff with tension. "Mom," he said, his voice barely rising above the cafe's ambient hum. "Ryan," I replied, gesturing to the chair across from me. "Thank you for coming." For a moment, silence hung between us, thick with the weight of our shared past and the fractures that had grown within it. 2 months had passed since our phone call, 2 months of careful negotiations through lawyers, cautious text messages, arranging this meeting. "You look well," he said finally, his eyes skittering away from mine. "Thank you," I responded, keeping my tone even. I didn't return the compliment. He didn't look well, and I wouldn't pretend otherwise. The air between us crackled with unspoken words, with memories of trust broken and loyalties tested. Ryan cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "The papers are signed, the agreement's official." I nodded. After weeks of back and forth, we'd reached a settlement over the intellectual property dispute. Ryan and Sophia could move forward with their new venture in San Francisco, using the Summit Solutions technology, but only with structured royalty payments to me as the primary creditor of the original company. More importantly, Ryan had issued a public retraction, admitting that his accusations of financial manipulation against me were false and unwarranted. It wasn't a perfect resolution, neither a full victory nor a complete surrender, but it was enough to let us both move forward, even if it left a lingering sense of unease. "How's Sophia handling the terms?" I asked, genuinely curious about his fiancée's reaction to the settlement. A flicker of something, discomfort, perhaps regret, crossed Ryan's face. "Sophia and I aren't together anymore," he said, his voice low. The admission caught me off guard, though perhaps it shouldn't have. "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I knew the pain of a broken relationship, even one as fraught as theirs. "Are you?" he asked, a trace of his old bitterness creeping in. "You never liked her." I met his gaze, steady but gentle. "I didn't like the influence she had on you," I corrected. "There's a difference, but I never wanted either of you to be unhappy." Ryan's eyes dropped to his hands, which were nervously shredding a paper napkin. "It was my decision, not hers," he said. "After everything, I started to see things differently. The way she kept pushing for more consulting fees, even when the company was drowning. The Bali trip, when we couldn't make payroll." He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. "I'm not blaming her for my choices. I went along with it, but leaving her was the only way I could start over." His words carried a flicker of self-awareness I hadn't expected, though I remained wary. Ryan had always been skilled at saying what others wanted to hear when it suited him. "And the new company?" "Kaimi?" I asked, whipping my tea. "How's that going?" He shrugged, his expression tight. "Slowly. The royalty payments make it harder to attract investors, and my reputation," he trailed off, then added quietly, "the tech world doesn't forget." I set my mug down, choosing my words carefully. "Actions have consequences, Ryan. That's a truth we all have to face." He nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know that now." There was a fragility in his tone, a crack in the armor he'd worn for so long. I didn't know if it was genuine or another performance, but for the first time, I felt a flicker of hope. Not for reconciliation, not yet, but for the possibility that he might one day find his way back to himself. For now, though, I held firm to my own path, my own strength, knowing that my healing didn't depend on his choices. It was enough to sit across from him, to speak with clarity and conviction, to move forward one careful step at a time. The weight of the past few months pressed heavily on my heart as I sat across from Ryan in the dimly lit cafe, the faint hum of conversation and clinking dishes filling the space around us. My son's face, once so familiar, now carried a shadow of uncertainty, his eyes searching mine for something. Forgiveness, perhaps, or a glimmer of the connection we'd lost. When the server approached, Ryan ordered a black coffee, his voice steady but tinged with a hesitancy that betrayed his nerves. As she walked away, he leaned forward slightly, his tone dropping to a near whisper, as if the words he was about to speak were too fragile to be shared with the world. He took a deep breath, his hands fidgeting briefly before settling on the table. "I came here today because I needed to say this in person, Mom, not through lawyers or emails. I'm sorry for everything. For misusing the money you entrusted to me, for the cruel things I said at that dinner, for the media campaign I launched against you for trying to access your accounts. All of it." The apology lingered in the air, heavy and raw, like a storm cloud that had finally broken. For months I'd yearned to hear those words, imagine them in moments of quiet despair, when the betrayal stung most sharply. But now, as they hung between us, I found myself grappling with a tangle of emotions, relief, skepticism, and a deep, aching uncertainty. Was this the genuine remorse of a son who had strayed too far, or another calculated move in a game that had never truly ended? My heart wanted to believe him, to see the boy I'd raised, the one who used to laugh so freely, but my mind cautioned restraint, reminding me of the wounds still fresh from his actions. "Thank you for saying that," I said, my voice measured, careful not to betray the storm inside me. "Apologies matter, Ryan, but they're only the first step. Making amends is a journey, not a destination." He nodded, his expression somber, his eyes fixed on the table as if it held the answers he sought. "I know," he said quietly. "I'm not asking for forgiveness or for things to snap back to how they were. I'm not even sure that's possible." I just needed you to know that I see it now, how terribly I've acted, how deeply I've hurt you." When his coffee arrived, he wrapped his hands around the mug, his fingers curling tightly around the warmth, mirroring my own posture. The gesture struck a chord deep within me, a sudden piercing reminder of my late husband, James, who used to hold his coffee the same way. The resemblance sent a pang of grief through my chest, a fleeting connection to a time when our family felt whole. Hoping to steer the conversation to safer ground, I asked, "What are your plans now?" Ryan's gaze lifted, and he seemed to relax slightly, as if grateful for the shift. "I'm staying with a friend in Portland for a few weeks," he said. "The new company is on hold while I figure things out. Honestly, I'm thinking about going in a completely different direction." He paused, a flicker of excitement crossing his face, though he tempered it with caution. "There's this nonprofit in Oakland working on environmental monitoring systems for underserved communities. The pay isn't great, but they're interested in my tech skills. It's meaningful work, something that could actually make a difference." As he spoke, I noticed a spark in his eyes, a quiet enthusiasm that reminded me of the Ryan I'd known before everything unraveled, before Summit Solutions, before Sophia, before the betrayal that had fractured our bond. The sincerity in his voice stirred a cautious hope in me, though I tempered it with the memory of past deceptions. "That sounds promising," I said, choosing my words carefully. "A chance to rebuild your career while doing something worthwhile." He nodded, quick to qualify. "It's still early days, and they're understandably cautious given my recent track record. But the director seems open to giving me a shot, especially since—" He trailed off, discomfort flickering across his face. "Since what?" I pressed, curiosity piqued. He shifted in his seat, then admitted, "Since Olivia vouched for me. She knows someone on their board and put in a good word." The revelation caught me off guard. Olivia, my daughter, hadn't mentioned this. "You've been in touch with Olivia?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral despite the swirl of emotions. Surprise, a twinge of something that felt like jealousy, and beneath it all, a quiet gratitude that my children might be finding their way back to each other. Ryan nodded, a faint, rueful smile touching his lips. I reached out to her after our phone call. She wasn't exactly thrilled to hear from me at first. She made it crystal clear how she felt about the way I treated you. But eventually, she agreed to meet for coffee when she was in San Francisco for a conference. We talked for hours. His words stirred a complex mix of feelings in me. I was surprised Olivia hadn't shared this with me, yet relieved to know she was still willing to engage with her brother, even after everything. "Olivia has always had a generous heart," I said finally, my voice softening. "She's protective of you, Mom," Ryan added. "She made it clear that any relationship with her depends on me making things right with you. You raised her well." His words carried a weight of acknowledgement, but also a shadow of regret. "I raised both of you," I pointed out gently, the words carrying a quiet ache. "With the same values, the same love." Ryan's expression darkened, his gaze dropping to his coffee. "And yet, look how differently we turned out. Look how differently we treated you." His voice was heavy with self-reproach, and for a moment, I saw the weight of his choices pressing down on him. "People make their own choices," I said, my tone firm, but not unkind. "As parents, we guide, we teach, we love, but in the end, each person decides who they'll become. You still have those choices ahead of you, Ryan. Every day is a chance to choose differently." He studied my face, his eyes searching for something, perhaps forgiveness, perhaps reassurance that he wasn't beyond redemption. "Do you think we can ever repair what's broken between us?" he asked, his voice raw with vulnerability. It was the question I'd been bracing for since his call 2 months ago, the one I'd turned over in my mind as the legal battles neared resolution. I'd rehearsed countless responses, from gentle platitudes to firm boundaries. But now, sitting across from my son, I found myself speaking a truth that cut deeper than any I'd prepared. "I don't know," I admitted, my voice steady but laced with the weight of honesty. "What broke between us wasn't just trust or money, though those were devastating. What broke was my understanding of who you were, of who we were to each other. I looked at you and saw a stranger. Someone capable of cruelty and deception I never imagined you could harbor. Ryan flinched, his jaws tightening, but he didn't interrupt, absorbing the sting of my words. Rebuilding after that kind of fracture isn't about apologies or legal settlements, I continued. It's about consistent actions over time. It's about you becoming someone I can trust again, not because you're my son and I want to believe in you, but because you've earned it through integrity and honesty. He swallowed hard, his voice strained as he asked, "And if I do that work? If I become that person?" I met his gaze, unflinching. "Then maybe we find a new way forward. Not the relationship we had before because that's gone, but something different, built on a clearer understanding of who we both are." Ryan nodded slowly, his expression a mix of resolve and uncertainty. "I'd like to try," he said simply. "I'm not expecting anything from you. Not money, not forgiveness, not even a relationship if that's not what you want. But I need to try, for myself as much as for you." For the first time since he'd walked into the cafe, I felt a flicker of genuine hope, not because his words were particularly eloquent or his promises airtight, but because of what I didn't hear. There was no trace of the manipulation that had once colored his every word, no hint of the calculated charm he'd wielded so expertly in the past. "I can accept that," I said, my voice softening but firm. "But understand, Ryan, my life has changed too. I'm not the same mother you left behind when you went to San Francisco. I've discovered strengths I didn't know I had. I've rebuilt relationships, forged new ones, and redefined what matters to me. Any new connection we build will need to respect who I've become, not just who you're trying to be." He looked at me, his eyes holding a quiet respect. "I'd like to know that person," he said softly. "The woman who stood up to me, who refused to be manipulated or controlled. The mother who chose her own integrity over enabling her son. That's someone I could learn from." His words settled over me, stirring a cautious warmth in my chest. For the first time in a long while, I saw not just the son who had hurt me, but the possibility of a man who might one day earn my trust again. The late afternoon light filtered through the cafe's wide windows, casting a warm glow over the table where Ryan, Olivia, and I sat, our conversation weaving carefully through safe, familiar ground. We spoke of Ryan's tentative plans to start a nonprofit, a flicker of hope in his voice that stirred something deep within me. Pride, perhaps, but tempered by caution born of past betrayals. Olivia shared the details of her recent promotion at the hospital, her eyes alight with a quiet confidence that made my heart swell with admiration for the woman she'd become. I described my upcoming European trip, planned for the following spring, each destination a small beacon of anticipation in a life that had weathered too many storms. We danced around the raw, jagged edges of our shared history, Sophia's absence, the lingering debts from Summit Solutions, the public fallout that had fractured our family. Those topics were landmines, and none of us were ready to tread there. As we gathered our things to leave, Ryan lingered, his hands fidgeting with the strap of his bag. His hesitation was palpable, a fragile bridge between us. "Would it be okay if I called you sometimes?" he asked, his voice soft, almost boyish. "Just to talk, to keep you updated on the nonprofit?" The question caught me off guard, stirring a mix of emotions, wariness, hope, and a longing for the son I'd once known so well. "I'd like that," I replied, surprised by the sincerity in my own voice. "Take care of yourself, Ryan." He met my gaze, his eyes holding a trace of the warmth I remembered from years ago. "You too, Mom," he said, and for a fleeting moment I saw the boy I'd raised, the one who'd dreamed big and loved fiercely, still lingering somewhere beneath the man who'd wounded me so deeply. We stepped out onto the sidewalk, exchanging an awkward half-hug, neither of us ready to fully embrace, but both sensing a subtle shift, a crack in the wall that had grown between us. As I watched him walk away, his silhouette fading into the bustling city, I felt neither the crushing grief that had haunted me for months, nor the naive optimism of hoping for miracles. Instead, a cautious openness settled in my chest, a delicate balance of possibility and the hard-earned wisdom that trust must be rebuilt, not assumed. The next morning I sat across from Jacob Pierce at Green Valley Investments, the air in his office thick with the scent of coffee and the quiet hum of financial charts on his computer. We reviewed my portfolio, the numbers a stark reminder of the losses I'd endured. "You've weathered this remarkably well," Jacob said, his tone warm but professional as he pointed to the updated projections. "The royalty agreement with Ryan's venture, if it takes off, could recover a significant chunk of your investment." I nodded, pragmatic as always. "And if it doesn't?" I asked, my voice steady despite the flicker of doubt in my mind. Jacob leaned back, his expression reassuring. "You're still in a stable position. Not as cushioned as 2 years ago, but secure. Your house is paid off, your retirement income is solid, and with careful planning, that European trip is still within reach." His words were a lifeline, grounding me in the reality that I could rebuild, even after everything. I brought up the gardening education fund I'd been dreaming of, a small foundation to bring gardening programs to underserved schools, a way to weave my lifelong passion into a legacy that mattered. The idea had taken root in my heart, a quiet rebellion against the losses I'd faced. Jacob's eyes lit up with a gentle smile. "Let's run the numbers," he said, pulling up a spreadsheet. "It might need to be modest at first, but it's absolutely doable." For the next hour, we mapped out a financial strategy that balanced pragmatism with my deepest priorities. Travel to feed my soul, philanthropy to give back, and time with Olivia and my closest friends to nurture the relationships that anchored me. As we wrapped up, Jacob leaned forward, his voice thoughtful. "I've worked with many clients who faced financial setbacks. Few handle it with the grace and resilience you've shown." I paused, considering his words. "It was never just about the money," I said, my voice soft but certain. "It was about what the money meant. My trust in Ryan, my belief in his potential, my love for him. Losing that hurt more than losing the investment." Jacob tilted his head, his eyes kind but probing. "And now, after seeing Ryan yesterday?" I took a moment, letting the question settle. "Now I'm learning to separate my heart from my wallet, to support without enabling, to give without expecting anything in return. It's an investment in myself, in causes that matter to me, in relationships that lift me up instead of draining me." Jacob nodded, a spark of approval in his gaze. "That's the kind of financial wisdom that builds a life, not just a portfolio." As I left his office, a quiet sense of triumph bloomed within me. The wounds from Summit Solutions were healing, slowly but surely, like a garden coaxing new life from soil battered by a brutal winter. That evening, my phone rang, and Daniel Cooper's name flashed on the screen. "Mrs. Wilson," he began, his voice warm but tentative. "I hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all, Daniel," I replied, smiling despite myself. "And please, call me Ellanor. We've moved past formalities." He chuckled, a soft sound that carried a hint of relief. "Ellanor, then, I wanted to share some news. I've taken a position with Cascade Environmental Systems. Their work aligns with what we hoped for at Summit Solutions, but their business model is more sustainable, more grounded." My heart lifted at his words. "That's wonderful, Daniel. They're lucky to have you." He paused, then ventured further, his tone more hesitant. "I also spoke with Ryan yesterday. He mentioned meeting you, maybe pursuing nonprofit work. Do you think, is it genuine?" The question hung between us, heavy with shared history. Daniel had seen Ryan's rise and fall up close, from the visionary entrepreneur with world-changing dreams to the man who'd let ambition twist into deception. Daniel had been caught in the fallout, choosing integrity over loyalty to his friend, and if anyone had earned the right to doubt Ryan's intentions, it was him. I took a breath, choosing my words carefully. "It's too early to know," I said honestly, "but I saw glimpses of the Ryan I used to know, the one with big ideas and a good heart. Maybe hitting rock bottom has given him perspective. Or maybe he's just trying a new angle. Only time will tell." Daniel's voice softened. "For what it's worth, I hope it's real. Despite everything, I remember the friend who wanted to build something that mattered. If that person's still in there, he's worth saving." After we hung up, I stepped onto my back porch, the sky ablaze with hues of orange and pink as the sun dipped below the horizon. Daniel's words echoed in my mind, particularly his hope that the Ryan we'd both known was still salvageable. But as I stood there, the cool evening air brushing against my skin, I realized something crucial. It wasn't my job to save Ryan. He was a grown man, responsible for his choices, his consequences, and the long road to redeeming himself. My responsibility was to myself, to the life I was carving out in this new chapter, to the boundaries I'd set, to the values I held dear. If Ryan chose a path of genuine change, perhaps we could forge a new, healthier connection. If not, I would move forward without him, carrying the ache of that loss, but refusing to let it define me. The garden of my life was beginning to bloom again, and I was determined to tend it with care, rooted in the wisdom of all I'd learned. 2 weeks after our poignant cafe meeting, Olivia arrived at my home for her scheduled visit, her presence filling the house with a familiar warmth. As we moved through the kitchen, preparing dinner together, our actions fell into a well-practiced rhythm that felt like a quiet balm for the soul. Olivia stood at the counter, her knife slicing through crisp vegetables with precision, while I stirred a simmering sauce on the stove, the rich aroma of herbs curling through the air. The clink of her knife against the cutting board and the gentle bubble of the sauce created a comforting cadence, a reminder of countless evenings spent together in this very room. "So," Olivia began, her tone light but deliberate, "did Ryan mention he's taking that nonprofit job in Oakland?" Her words caught me off guard, though I kept my focus on the saucepan, stirring slowly to mask the flicker of surprise. "He said it was a possibility," I replied, my voice steady, "but he didn't tell me he'd decided." Olivia glanced over, her hands pausing briefly. "He called me yesterday to share the news. Starts next month, at half the salary he was earning at Summit Solutions." He sounded excited, actually. Her words hung in the air, and I felt a quiet pang in my chest. Ryan hadn't reached out to me with this update, despite the raw honesty of our recent conversation. The omission stung, though I wasn't entirely surprised. Trust, once fractured, leaves sharp edges that take time to soften. I kept stirring, letting the information settle, my mind replaying the moment Ryan and I had sat across from each other at the cafe. His earnest eyes, his halting apologies, the weight of his betrayal still heavy between us. "Are you two in regular contact now?" I asked, my tone carefully neutral. Olivia set her knife down, turning to face me fully, her expression a mix of caution and resolve. "I was going to bring this up," she said, her voice softer now. "Since we all met in San Francisco, I've been talking to Ryan about once a week. I didn't say anything earlier because, well, I wasn't sure how you'd feel about it." Her words carried a trace of guilt, and I could see the conflict in her eyes, the love she held for her brother warring with her fierce loyalty to me. I met her gaze, offering a gentle smile to ease her worry. "You don't need my permission to have a relationship with your brother, Olivia," I said, my voice warm but firm. She nodded, but her brow remained furrowed. "I know, Mom, but after everything he did to you, I didn't want you to think I was taking sides or betraying you." Her honesty pierced me, and I reached out, squeezing her hand, her skin cool from handling the vegetables. "Sweetheart," I said, my voice thick with emotion, "family isn't a zero-sum game. Your love for Ryan doesn't take anything away from your loyalty to me. I'd never want to stand between you two." Olivia's shoulders visibly relaxed, a small breath escaping her as if she'd been holding it for weeks. "He's really trying, Mom," she said, her voice earnest. "This nonprofit job, therapy twice a week, even volunteering at a community garden on weekends. He's putting in the work. And he talks about you a lot, how much he regrets what happened, how he's trying to live up to the values you raised us with." Her words painted a picture of a son I both recognized and didn't, a man grappling with his mistakes, striving to rebuild himself from the ashes of his choices. "I hope that's true," I said, returning to the sauce, though my mind was far from the stove. "For his sake as much as mine." Olivia studied me, her perceptive eyes catching the guarded edge in my tone. "You're still skeptical," she observed, not accusing but simply stating what she saw. I hesitated, then corrected her gently. "Cautious," I said. "Trust doesn't heal overnight, Olivia, but I'm open to the possibility that he's changing. Our meeting at the cafe, it was better than I expected." She nodded, resuming her chopping, the rhythmic sound filling the space again. "He was so nervous about seeing you," she added, almost as an afterthought. "Called me the night before, practically having a panic attack about what to say, how to act." The image she conjured of Ryan, once so self-assured, now anxious and vulnerable before a meeting with his own mother, tugged at something deep within me. I pictured him pacing his apartment, rehearsing words like a nervous teenager, his confidence eroded by the weight of his guilt. It was a glimpse of the boy I'd raised, still buried beneath the man who'd hurt me so deeply. We're all navigating this new reality, I said after a moment, my voice quieter now, reflective, including me. The words felt like an admission, a crack in the armor I'd worn since Ryan's betrayal had upended our family. Olivia seized the opportunity to shift the mood, her tone turning deliberately playful. Speaking of new realities, she said, a teasing glint in her eye, are you going to tell me about this Jacob Pierce I keep hearing about? Ryan said you two seemed pretty friendly at your financial review meeting. Heat crept into my cheeks, and I busied myself with the sauce, hoping to hide my fluster. Jacob is my financial advisor, I said, aiming for nonchalance. We've known each other for years. Olivia raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. Mm-hmm. And he just happened to invite you to the symphony next weekend? I froze, my spoon hovering over the pan. How do you know about that? I demanded, turning to face her. She grinned, utterly unrepentant. You left the tickets on the hall table, Mom. Very good seats, by the way. I groaned, feeling like a teenager caught sneaking out. It's not a date, I protested, though my voice lacked conviction. We just share an interest in classical music. It's perfectly innocent. Olivia's expression softened, her teasing giving way to something more sincere. Mom, she said gently, it would be okay if it wasn't innocent. Dad's been gone for 10 years. You deserve companionship, romance even, if that's what you want. Her words struck a chord I hadn't realized was still strung so tightly. I turned back to the stove, ostensibly to check the sauce, but really to hide the tears pricking my eyes. The idea of dating at my age felt absurd, almost comical, yet terrifying in its vulnerability. And yet the thought of an evening with Jacob, with his sharp mind, his quiet kindness, his passion for music and culture, had sparked a flutter of anticipation I hadn't felt in years. It was a sensation both thrilling and unsettling, like stepping onto a path I'd long thought closed. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, I said finally, my voice steadier than I felt. It's one evening at the symphony, not a whirlwind romance. Olivia didn't press further, though her knowing smile lingered as we finished preparing dinner, the kitchen filled with the warm glow of our shared labor. Later that week, while sorting through old files in my home office, I stumbled across a photograph I'd forgotten existed. It was James and me, standing in front of our newly purchased house, the sold sign staked proudly in the lawn. We were so young, our faces alight with hope, blissfully unaware of the joys and sorrows that awaited us. I traced my finger over James's face, his broad smile frozen in time, and memories flooded back. How he'd insisted on carrying me over the threshold despite my protests. How we'd picnicked on the living room floor that first night, our furniture still en route. We'd sat there dreaming aloud about the life we'd build in this empty house, the children we'd raise, the love that would fill its walls. What would you think of all this, James? I whispered, a habit I'd never fully shed despite the decades since his passing. Ryan, the business, the betrayal, me going to the symphony with Jacob Pierce. The silence that followed was expected, yet I sat with the photo feeling a clarity that almost seemed like his answer. James had been a man of integrity, teaching our children that character meant doing the right thing, even when it was hard. He would have been heartbroken by Ryan's actions, but he would have supported my choice to set boundaries, to protect my heart while leaving room for healing. And Jacob? James had never been possessive, even joking during his illness that I shouldn't become a lonely old widow after he was gone. The memory brought a bittersweet smile, tears blurring the edges of the photo. In honoring my own worth, refusing to be manipulated, cautiously opening myself to new possibilities, I wasn't betraying James. I was living the strength we'd admired in each other, the values we'd tried to instill in our children. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. Got the nonprofit job, starting May 1st. Thank you for the coffee and conversation. It meant more than you know. Would like to keep you updated on how it goes, if that's okay. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. A small gesture, yet it carried the weight of his effort, his desire to rebuild what he'd broken. I typed a reply. Congratulations. I'd like to hear about your work there. Take care. It was simple, measured, not effusive, but not cold. A tentative step, like a seedling testing new soil, uncertain but willing to grow. As April gave way to May, I found myself stepping into a season of unexpected renewal. The gardening education fund I'd been working on was taking shape, with a pilot program set to launch in 3 Portland schools that fall. My European trip was fully planned, and Olivia had promised to join me for the Italian leg, her excitement infectious. And Jacob and I had shared not just the symphony, but 2 dinners and a lecture on sustainable investing. Each outing more comfortable, more engaging than the last. Each moment with him felt like a quiet unfolding, a reminder that life, even now, held possibilities I hadn't dared to imagine. Every couple of weeks, Ryan and I exchanged brief phone calls, our conversations orbiting safely around his work at the nonprofit, with occasional detours to mention Olivia or my upcoming travel plans. We never ventured into the raw, unhealed wounds of our past, a deliberate choice to avoid reopening old scars. It wasn't the deep, vibrant connection we once had, where laughter and trust flowed freely. But it was something, a delicate thread, carefully woven, linking the people we used to be with the ones we were slowly becoming. Those calls, though guarded, carried a quiet hope, like the first green shoots pushing through soil after a long winter. They were a testament to our mutual effort to rebuild, even if the bridge between us was still fragile, swaying under the weight of unspoken history. One evening in late May, I was kneeling in my garden, the earth cool and yielding beneath my fingers as I planted summer vegetables, tomatoes, zucchini, peppers, that would thrive in the warm months ahead. The act of gardening always grounded me, a ritual of nurturing life that mirrored my own slow journey toward healing. My phone buzzed, jarring me from my thoughts. Ryan's name lit up the screen, and my heart gave a small, instinctive lurch. Not fear exactly, but a wariness born of past betrayals. "Mom," he said when I answered, his voice taut, like a tightly strung wire. "I just heard from Daniel. Summit Solutions patents have been acquired by Cascade Environmental. The deal covers all remaining creditors, including the royalty obligation to you." I set down my trowel, the weight of his words sinking in like rain into parched soil. My mind raced, piecing together what this meant. The company I had poured so much into, my savings, my trust, my belief in Ryan's dream, had collapsed under the weight of broken promises, leaving me to rebuild from the wreckage. This news, though, was a flicker of light in that darkness. "That's good news, isn't it?" I asked, my voice steady despite the emotions swirling within me. "It benefits everyone involved." Ryan agreed, but there was a hesitation in his tone, a pause heavy with something unsaid. "Mom, the amount they're paying, it's substantial. After all creditors are paid, there's a remainder that'll come to me as the original founder." I leaned back on my heels, wiping dirt from my hands, and let his words settle. A mix of relief and pride stirred in my chest. Relief that Ryan might finally be free of the financial burdens that had haunted him, and pride, faint but real, that he was sharing this with me. "I'm glad to hear that," I said, meaning every word. "A fresh start, without that cloud hanging over you, will make things easier." There was a long silence, the kind that hums with unspoken thoughts. Then Ryan's voice came again, softer but resolute. "Would you be willing to meet me in Portland this weekend? There's something I'd like to discuss in person." Curiosity bloomed, tinged with caution. Our history had taught me to tread carefully, to guard my heart against the possibility of disappointment. But something in his tone, earnest, almost vulnerable, pulled at me. I agreed, and we settled on meeting at the Portland Botanical Gardens, a place that had become my sanctuary. As a volunteer and frequent visitor, I found solace among its manicured paths and vibrant blooms, a space where I could breathe deeply and let the world's chaos fall away. The gardens were a reflection of my own inner work, carefully tended, resilient, and always growing, even after seasons of loss. 2 days later, I arrived at the Japanese garden section, the air thick with the scent of cedar and damp moss. Ryan stood near a cluster of meticulously pruned trees, a manila envelope clutched in his hands. His nervous energy was palpable. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, his eyes scanning the path until they met mine. My heart tightened at the sight of him, a mix of love and lingering hurt. He was my son, but he was also the man who had shattered my trust, whose choices had forced me to redraw the boundaries of our relationship. "Thank you for meeting me," he said, his voice warm but edged with unease. He gestured to a nearby bench surrounded by smooth stones and the soft rustle of leaves. We sat, the tranquility of the garden wrapping around us like a cocoon. "What did you want to discuss?" I asked, my tone calm but curious, my hands folded in my lap to steady myself. Ryan hesitated, then handed me the envelope, his fingers brushing mine for the briefest moment. "I want you to have this," he said simply. I opened it, my breath catching, as I saw a cashier's check in mine, the amount staggering. My original investment in Summit Solutions plus the interest it would have accrued over the past 2 years. My eyes widened, not just at the figure, but at what it represented. "Ryan," I began, my voice faltering, "the settlement agreement doesn't require—" "This isn't about legal requirements," he interrupted, his tone gentle but firm, like he'd rehearsed these words 100 times. "This is about doing what's right. You invested in me, in my dream, and I betrayed that trust. The settlement was a compromise, a way to move forward. But this—" He nodded toward the check, his eyes steady on mine. "This is restitution. It's about repaying what I owed you. Fully." I studied his face, searching for any hint of ulterior motive, any trace of the manipulation that had once clouded our relationship. Instead, I saw a quiet resolve, a determination that reminded me of his father, stubborn, principled, and unafraid to face hard truths. My heart ached with the weight of it all, the pride in his growth, the sorrow for the years we'd lost, the cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, we could find our way back to each other. "Your nonprofit salary can't possibly support this kind of payment," I said, my practical side kicking in. "This must be everything from the patent acquisition. Maybe more." Ryan nodded, unflinching. "It is, every penny. I talked it over with my therapist for weeks. She believes making full financial amends is a crucial step in my recovery. But more than that, it's what I need to do to live with myself." His words landed heavily, each one carrying the weight of his introspection, his struggle to become a man he could respect. I looked down at the check, then back at him, my emotions a tangled knot. Gratitude for his gesture, grief for the trust we'd lost, and beneath it all, a spark of pride in the man sitting beside me. He was choosing the harder path, the one that demanded sacrifice and accountability, when an easier one, keeping the money, moving on, would have been so much simpler. "Thank you," I said, my voice soft but sincere. "This means more than you know." Ryan's face softened, but he was quick to clarify. "I don't expect this to fix everything between us. I know it doesn't erase the past, but I hope it shows I'm serious about making amends, about becoming someone you can trust again." His words hung in the air, mingling with the gentle ripple of the koi pond nearby. In that moment, surrounded by the serene beauty of the Chinese garden, I let myself believe that the Ryan I'd raised, the one with a moral compass, a capacity for growth, was still there. Not fully restored, perhaps, but not lost either. Buried, maybe, or temporarily set aside, but still alive, stirring beneath the surface. "It's a significant step," I said, meeting his gaze. "One of many on a long journey for both of us." We sat in silence for a while, the kind of silence that doesn't demand words, only presence. The koi moved gracefully in the pond, their colors flashing in the dappled light, and I felt a quiet peace settle over me. Ryan broke the silence first. "I've been thinking about what you said at the cafe, about becoming someone trustworthy through consistent actions over time. I want you to know I'm committed to that, however long it takes." "I believe you." But and to my surprise, I meant it. Not blindly, not without the reservations carved by our past, but enough to nurture the fragile possibility of reconciliation. As we walked through the gardens afterward, talking about his work and my upcoming trip, I felt a warmth I hadn't expected. A quiet gratitude, not for a perfect resolution, but for the discovery of my own strength. I had faced betrayal and survived, learning to set boundaries without succumbing to bitterness. I had found the courage to rebuild a life that reflected my truest self, my deepest values. The road ahead was uncertain. Ryan's commitment to change would be tested by time, by challenges we couldn't yet foresee. Our relationship might grow stronger, rooted in honesty and mutual respect, or it might find its limits as we each carved out our own paths. But whatever lay ahead, I faced it with a newfound confidence in my resilience. I had weathered the collapse of dreams I'd funded, endured public attacks on my character, and emerged stronger, wiser, more authentically myself than I had been in decades. When Ryan had called me a burden, he had unknowingly set in motion a transformation, one that forced me to cancel the monthly transfers that had propped up his failing business, to protect my financial future, and in doing so, to reclaim my personal power. The woman who emerged from that painful decision was not just a survivor, but a creator of her own story, and that was the greatest return on any investment I had ever made.